Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been hauling freight for close to 11 years now. 11 years of watching white lines disappear under my hood, of rest stops that all look the same, of diners where the coffee tastes like it was brewed 3 days ago and reheated in a microwave. You get used to it after a while. The loneliness becomes something you don't fight anymore. The hum of 18 wheels on asphalt becomes the only sound you need. And the night, well, the night becomes your workspace, your office, your entire world. My name is Dalton Reed, and I drive a Kenworth W900 that's seen better days. She's a 2011 model, dark blue, with some rust creeping up the driver's side door, but she runs clean and she's never let me down. I've put close to 800,000 miles on her, maybe more. I stopped counting after 700. The odometer's been wonky for the past year anyway, sometimes jumping forward, sometimes rolling back. I keep meaning to get it fixed, but there's always another load, always another deadline. The route I'm about to tell you about started like any other. It was a Tuesday night in late September, one of those nights where the air just starts to hint at fall but still holds on to summer's warmth. I'd picked up a load of industrial equipment in Columbus, Ohio. Hydraulic pumps, metal casings, the kind of heavy cargo that makes your rig sit lower on its suspension. The delivery was set for a warehouse outside of St. Louis, Missouri, a straight shot west on I-70. Should have been a clean 9-hour drive, maybe 10 if I hit construction. I left the shipping yard around 8:30 p.m., just as the sun was starting to dip below the horizon. The sky was doing that thing it does in September, turning this deep orange that bleeds into purple at the edges. I remember thinking it looked like a bruise. I don't know why that stuck with me, but it did. The air smelled like diesel and cut grass, and there was a pickup baseball game happening in a field adjacent to the lot. I could hear kids shouting, the metallic ping of an aluminum bat connecting with the ball. The first couple hours were routine. I-70 West is a road I know like the back of my hand. Every exit, every rest stop, every place where the cops like to sit with their radar guns. I had my CB radio on, listening to other drivers chatter about road conditions, about a multi-car pileup near Indianapolis that was backing up traffic for miles. I was grateful I'd missed that mess. Some old-timer named Garrett was talking about his granddaughter's birthday party, how he'd promised to be there but was stuck 3 states away. Another driver, younger guy, was complaining about a dispatcher who kept changing his routes mid-haul. I grabbed a coffee from my thermos, black, no sugar, the way I've been drinking it since I started this job. The coffee was lukewarm by then, kind of bitter, but it did the trick. I wasn't tired yet. I had this rhythm I'd fall into on long hauls, this mental autopilot where my body knew what to do without my brain having to think too hard about it. Check your mirrors. Watch your speed. Keep your following distance. Signal before you change lanes. All of it becomes second nature. Around 10:45 p.m., I crossed into Indiana. There's a certain stretch of I-70 in eastern Indiana that's just empty. No towns nearby, no truck stops for miles, just farmland stretching out in every direction. During the day you can see cornfields and silos, and the occasional farmhouse sitting way back from the road. But at night, there's nothing. Just darkness pressing in on both sides of the highway, and your headlights cutting a tunnel through it. That's when I started noticing the overpasses. Now, overpasses are nothing special. They're just bridges that carry one road over another, usually made of concrete, usually painted in that industrial gray-green color that every department of transportation seems to favor. I-70 has dozens of them, maybe hundreds. County roads, state routes, farm access roads, they all need to cross the interstate somehow, so they build these bridges over it. You drive under them so often you stop seeing them. They're just part of the scenery, part of the infrastructure that makes the whole interstate system work. But that night, I started really seeing them. The first one I remember was around the 143-mile marker. It was one of those small overpasses, probably a 2-lane county road crossing the highway. As I approached, my headlights illuminated the concrete supports, and I could see the usual things. Graffiti, scrawled in faded spray paint, rust stains where water had dripped, reflective markers along the edge. Nothing extraordinary, nothing worth focusing on. But as I passed underneath it, something made me feel the need to look in the rearview mirror. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was nothing. But I looked and saw the overpass receding behind me, illuminated by the red light of my taillights. And I heard something, a sound I initially thought was just the natural echo of my engine bouncing off the concrete walls. It was a low rumble, the kind of sound an 18-wheeler makes, amplified and thrown back at you when you pass under a low bridge or through a tunnel. I'd heard it 1,000 times before, but this time it seemed to last a little longer than usual, like the echo didn't fade quite as fast as it should have. I shook my head and took another sip of coffee. My imagination was running away with me. Echoes sound different depending on all kinds of factors: temperature, humidity, wind, the shape of the structure. Maybe this overpass just had some weird acoustic property. It wasn't worth thinking about. I kept driving. The miles clicked by 145, 147, 150. The farmland continued on both sides of me, invisible in the darkness. Every now and then, I'd see the lights of a distant farmhouse, just a yellow square of light in the middle of all that black. I wondered what kind of people lived out there, so far from everything. Did they like the isolation? Did they ever get lonely? Or had they grown up with it? The way I'd grown up with the sound of freight trains running behind my childhood home. Around 11:20 p.m., I passed under another overpass. This one was bigger, probably a state road. It had 2 lanes in each direction, and I could see a car's headlights moving across it just as I went underneath. The same thing happened. That low rumble of my engine echoing off the concrete, bouncing around in the confined space under the bridge. But again, the echo seemed to linger. It rolled on for maybe a second longer than I expected, like the sound was being held onto by the structure itself, reluctant to let go. I turned down my CB radio just to hear it better. The echo faded, finally, disappearing into the night behind me. But there was something about the quality of it that bothered me. It didn't sound quite right. It sounded, I don't know how to describe this without sounding crazy, but it sounded deliberate. Like the overpass was doing it on purpose. I laughed out loud at myself. That was ridiculous. Overpasses don't do anything on purpose. They're just concrete and rebar. They sit there holding up roads, and they don't think, and they don't have intentions. I was just tired, even though I didn't feel tired. Sometimes exhaustion creeps up on you like that, affecting your perception before you realize you need to pull over. But I wasn't ready to stop yet. I had a schedule to keep, and I was making good time. The highway was practically empty. I'd maybe seen 5 other vehicles in the past hour, and none of them were trucks. Just the occasional sedan or SUV heading east, back toward Ohio. The lack of traffic was actually kind of nice. No one to slow me down. No one riding my bumper. No 4-wheelers cutting me off because they didn't understand how long it takes a loaded semi to stop. At mile marker 156, I passed under a 3rd overpass. This one looked almost identical to the first one I'd noticed. Same size, same graffiti-tagged supports, same rust stains. And once again, As I drove beneath it, I heard that echo. My engine's rumble bounced off the concrete, amplified, and then it lingered. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3, when it should have faded in less than 1. I found myself counting in my head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. The echo was still going. 4 Mississippi. Finally, it faded away. That was too long. That was definitely too long. I checked my mirrors, half expecting to see, I don't know what. Another truck right behind me maybe, producing a second engine sound that I was interpreting as an extended echo. But there was nothing. The highway behind me was empty, just 2 lanes of dark asphalt lit up by my taillights, and beyond that, nothing but darkness. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I was being ridiculous. Echoes could be weird. Sound waves could bounce around in unexpected ways, especially in the open air of a highway at night. Temperature inversions, atmospheric conditions, all of that could affect how sound traveled. I remembered reading something about that once, in a popular mechanics magazine I'd picked up at a truck stop. But even as I tried to rationalize it, something in my gut was telling me that something wasn't right. The road stretched ahead of me, empty and straight. My headlights reached maybe 300 feet, illuminating the white fog line on the right and the yellow dashes in the center. Beyond that cone of light, there was only darkness. The kind of darkness you only get in rural areas, far from any cities or towns. The kind of darkness that feels thick, almost physical. I glanced at my GPS. I was making good time, right on schedule. If I maintained my current speed, about 68 miles per hour, just a bit over the limit but not enough to attract attention, I'd hit St. Louis around 5:30 a.m., right as the sun was coming up. Perfect timing for an early morning delivery. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't the overpasses themselves. They were just structures, just bridges. It was the echo, that lingering, hanging echo that lasted too long. I passed under a 4th overpass at mile marker 161. I was ready for it this time, paying attention, really listening. As I entered the space beneath the bridge, my engine's sound changed, becoming louder, more resonant. That was normal. Enclosed spaces amplify sound. But then, as I emerged on the other side, the echo should have cut off quickly, absorbed by the open air. It didn't. The rumble continued, rolling out behind me like a wave. I watched my rearview mirror, watched the overpass recede into the darkness, and the echo kept going. 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 7. I felt a chill run down my spine despite the warmth of the cab. That wasn't normal. That wasn't even close to normal. My CB radio crackled, startling me. A voice came through, distorted by static. "Anyone out there on I-70 westbound? This is Riggs, looking for westbound?" I grabbed the handset. "This is Dalton. I'm westbound on 70 in Indiana. You breaking up pretty bad, buddy. What's your 20? More static. Then, mile 158. You seeing anything weird with the... The transmission cut out completely. I tried to respond, keying the mic a few times. "Riggs, you still there? Repeat your last. You cut out." Nothing. Just static. I cycled through the channels, trying to pick up his signal again, but it was gone. The CB was working fine on the other channels. I could hear distant conversations, truckers way out ahead of me talking about a good breakfast place off exit 79, a couple of guys arguing about football scores. But Riggs was gone, and I couldn't help but notice that he'd been at mile marker 158, 3 miles behind me, right around where I'd passed under that 2nd or 3rd overpass. Had he been asking me if I was seeing anything weird? Was that what he was trying to say? I pushed the thought away. The transmission had been garbled. He could have been asking about weather, about traffic, about road conditions. I was reading into it, letting my imagination run wild just because of a few weird echoes. The miles continued to tick by. 165, 168, 170. Every few miles there was another overpass, and every time I passed under one, the same thing happened. That extended echo, lasting longer than it should, hanging in the air behind me like something alive. At mile marker 173, I noticed something else. As I approached the overpass, my cab seemed to get colder. Just a degree or two, nothing drastic but noticeable. I glanced at my temperature gauge, thinking maybe my heating system was malfunctioning, but it was reading normal. The outside temperature was showing 61 degrees, same as it had been for the past hour. But I was cold. Not freezing, not even shivering, but cold enough that I rubbed my arms and wished I'd worn a thicker jacket. The feeling passed as soon as I emerged from under the bridge. The cab warmed up again, back to its comfortable 70-something degrees. I told myself it was just the wind, just a draft coming in through some gap in the door seal. Trucks have drafts, it's part of driving an older rig. But I didn't believe myself. I checked the clock on my dashboard. 11:47 p.m. I'd been on the road for just over 3 hours, and I still had about 6 hours to go. Under normal circumstances, I'd be thinking about pulling into a rest stop around 2 a.m., maybe grabbing a couple hours of sleep in the sleeper berth, then finishing the drive in the morning. But something told me I didn't want to stop. Not tonight. Not on this stretch of road. The smart thing would have been to pull over right then, to stop at the next exit and wait until morning. Or at least to call someone, to check in with dispatch and let them know I was experiencing... What? Weird echoes? A slight temperature drop? They'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. At mile marker 178, I passed under an overpass that looked different from the others. It was older, the concrete darker and more weathered. The graffiti was faded, almost invisible. And the supports looked thicker, heavier, like this bridge had been built to carry more weight than a simple county road. As I drove beneath it, the echo was the loudest yet. My engine's rumble was amplified to the point where it almost hurt my ears, a deep bass note that I could feel in my chest. And when I emerged on the other side, the echo didn't just linger. It seemed to change pitch slightly, dropping lower, becoming something that didn't quite sound like my engine anymore. I found myself holding my breath, listening. The echo rolled on and on and on. 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20. Finally, it faded, but not all at once. It diminished gradually, like something reluctantly releasing its grip. My mouth was dry. I reached for my water bottle, taking a long drink, trying to calm my nerves. This was insane. Echoes didn't work like this. Sound didn't behave this way. There had to be a rational explanation, some kind of atmospheric phenomenon maybe, or an auditory illusion caused by fatigue. But I wasn't fatigued. I felt wide awake, more alert than I'd been in weeks. Every sense was heightened. I could hear the hum of my tires on the pavement, the slight rattle of something loose in the cab, the whisper of wind passing over my mirrors. I could see every detail lit up by my headlights, the texture of the asphalt, the reflective paint on the lane markers, a piece of shredded tire on the shoulder. The highway ahead was still empty. No taillights, no headlights, nothing. Just me and the road and the darkness. At mile marker 183, another overpass. I slowed down slightly as I approached it, not sure why. Some instinct telling me to be cautious. The concrete supports came into view, and I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There were marks on the pillars, dark streaks that looked almost like burn marks. They ran vertically, starting about 10 feet up and going all the way to the top of the support. I'd seen similar marks before, usually on overpasses that had been there a long time. They came from years of exhaust and road grime building up. But these looked fresher, darker, like they'd been made recently. As I passed underneath, the temperature dropped again. This time it was more pronounced, maybe 5 degrees, enough that I could see my breath fogging slightly in the air. The echo was immediate and intense, and it carried a strange quality, not just the rumble of my engine, but something else beneath it. A lower frequency, almost subsonic, that I felt more than heard. And then, just as I was clearing the overpass, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Within the echo, buried in that rolling rumble, was what sounded like a voice. Not words, not anything I could understand, but a voice nonetheless. Low, distorted, almost like someone speaking through a long tunnel or a broken speaker. I jerked the wheel slightly in surprise, the truck drifting toward the shoulder before I corrected. My heart was pounding. I stared at the rearview mirror, watching the overpass disappear behind me, the echo finally fading away. That wasn't possible. That was absolutely not possible. I was hearing things. I had to be hearing things. But I knew what I'd heard. And I knew it hadn't been my imagination. I grabbed the CB handset again, needing to hear another human voice, needing to know I wasn't alone out here. "This is Dalton on I-70 westbound. Anyone out there? Anyone listening?" Static. For a long moment, just static. Then, finally, a response. "Yeah, buddy, I got you. This is Maxwell. I'm eastbound around mile 195. What's going on?" The relief that flooded through me was almost overwhelming. "Maxwell, you been driving this stretch for long? You notice anything unusual?" A pause. Unusual how? I didn't know how to explain it without sounding crazy. "The overpasses, the bridges, you been paying attention to them?" Another pause, longer this time. When Maxwell responded, his voice was cautious. "Can't say I have, buddy. What about them?" "Never mind," I said quickly. "Must be tired. Thanks for the response." "No problem. Drive safe out there." The CB went quiet again. Maxwell probably thought I was losing it. Maybe I was. At mile marker 188, the next overpass appeared in my headlights. I didn't want to go under it. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to take the next exit, to get off this highway to find another route. But the next exit was still 3 miles away, and to reach it, I'd have to pass under at least 2 more overpasses. I could slow down, I thought. I could reduce my speed to 30, to 20, to a crawl, but that would just draw out the experience, make it last longer. And besides, what if another vehicle came up behind me? I'd be a hazard, a slow-moving obstacle on an otherwise empty highway. No. I had to keep going. I had to maintain my speed and drive through this like it was normal. Because it was normal. Because overpasses were just concrete structures and echoes were just sound waves, and I was a professional driver who had been doing this for 11 years without incident. The overpass loomed closer. I kept my foot steady on the accelerator, maintained my speed at 68. As I entered the space beneath the bridge, I braced myself for the cold, for the echo, for whatever else might happen. The temperature dropped, the echo began, my engine's rumble amplified and bounced back at me, and within it, I heard that voice again. Clearer this time. Still not words. Not anything resembling language, but definitely a voice. It sounded old, tired, like something that had been making that sound for a very long time and had worn itself out in the process. The echo lasted 30 seconds. I counted every one of them, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. When it finally faded, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. 2 miles to the next exit. I could make it. I could pull off at the exit, find a gas station or a rest area, and wait there until morning. Or I could call dispatch, tell them I was experiencing mechanical problems, needed to stop for the night. They'd understand, they'd have to understand. But even as I thought it, I knew I wouldn't do it. Because stopping would mean admitting that something was wrong, that something about this night was fundamentally not right. And I wasn't ready to admit that yet. The next overpass appeared at mile marker 191. This one was different. It was wider, newer, with smoother concrete and cleaner lines. A major state route, probably. There were lights on the bridge itself, sodium vapor lamps casting an orange glow that I could see from half a mile away. As I approached, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. There was a car parked on the overpass right at the edge, its hazard lights blinking. I could see the silhouette of someone standing next to it, leaning against the railing, looking down at the highway, looking down at me. I told myself it was just someone having car trouble. Maybe they'd broken down. Maybe they were waiting for a tow truck. It was nothing to worry about. But something about the way the figure was standing, completely still, just watching, made every hair on the back of my neck stand up. I passed under the overpass, and the cold hit me like a physical thing. It was like driving into a refrigerator. I could see my breath in thick clouds now, and my hands started to go numb despite the warmth of the cab just seconds before. The echo was the worst yet. It wasn't just loud. It was overwhelming, filling the cab with sound, making the whole truck vibrate. And the voice within it was unmistakable now. Multiple voices actually, speaking over each other, none of them forming words, but all of them clearly trying to communicate something. I glanced up through my windshield as I passed under the bridge, and in that split second, I saw the figure on the overpass lean further over the railing, following my truck with their eyes. Or where their eyes should have been. The sodium vapor lights created a backlight effect, throwing the figure into silhouette. But I swear I couldn't see any features. Just a dark shape, watching. The echo lasted almost a minute. A full minute of those voices, of that overwhelming sound, of that bone-deep cold. When I finally emerged into the normal night air, the warmth rushing back into the cab, I was shaking. The exit was just ahead. Exit 193, leading to some small town I'd never heard of. I put on my turn signal, started to slow down, preparing to leave this highway and whatever was happening on it. But then I looked at my GPS, and my blood turned to ice. According to the GPS, I was at mile marker 178, the same mile marker I'd passed 15 minutes ago. The same overpass I'd driven under earlier, the old one with the dark streaks on the supports. That wasn't possible. I'd been driving west the entire time, maintaining my speed, passing under multiple overpasses. I'd gone from mile marker 178 to mile marker 191. I'd watched the numbers increment on the signs. I'd seen them. But the GPS insisted I was at mile marker 178. I looked ahead, and in the glow of my headlights I could see the next overpass approaching, and it looked exactly like the one at mile marker 178. Same dark concrete, same weathered appearance, same thick supports. I'd been here before. I'd passed under this exact bridge before. But that didn't make sense. I'd been driving in a straight line. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't looped back. The highway didn't loop back. It was a straight shot west, had been for miles. The overpass loomed ahead of me. I slowed down further, now doing about 45, my mind racing. This had to be a different overpass. It just looked similar. Indiana had hundreds of overpasses, and plenty of them looked alike. It was a coincidence, but as I got closer, I could see the graffiti tags on the supports. The same tags I'd seen before. The same exact spray-painted designs. The same faded blue and red letters spelling out words I couldn't quite read. I was approaching the same overpass I'd passed under 15 minutes ago, and I couldn't stop myself from going under it again. My foot pressed down on the brake, but not hard enough. The truck was slowing but still moving forward, still carrying momentum. The overpass filled my windshield, and then I was underneath it, plunged into that terrible cold, enveloped by that overwhelming echo. The voices were screaming now, not in pain or in fear, but in something else. Something that might have been warning, or might have been celebration. I couldn't tell. The sound was too distorted, too massive, pressing in on me from all sides, and the echo didn't fade this time. It continued, following me as I emerged from under the bridge, hanging in the air behind my truck like something physical, like something attached to me. I looked at my odometer. The numbers were spinning backward, not quickly, but visibly, clicking down instead of up. 756,432 miles, 756,431, 7,430. My GPS flickered. The mile marker reading changed. 178, then 177, then 176. I was going backward. Even though I was driving forward, even though my speedometer was showing 45 miles per hour in forward motion, I was going backward. Panic hit me then. Real terror, the kind of fear that makes your hands shake and your vision narrow. I slammed on the brakes, bringing the truck to a complete stop right there in the middle of the highway. My air brakes hissed, and the truck shuddered as it came to rest. I sat there, engine idling, in the middle of westbound I-70, breathing hard. The echo had finally faded, leaving behind only the normal sounds of the night. My engine, the wind, the gentle tick of cooling metal. I looked at my GPS. Mile marker 176. I looked at my odometer, 756,428 miles. I'd been driving for 3 hours and 45 minutes, and I'd gone backward 8 miles. The logical part of my brain was screaming that this was impossible, that GPS systems could malfunction, that odometers could fail, that I was just confused, tired, experiencing some kind of episode. But the rest of me knew, with absolute certainty, that something was very wrong with this stretch of highway. I looked ahead. Another overpass was visible in the distance, maybe half a mile away. I looked behind. The overpass I'd just passed under was still there, receding in my mirrors. If I kept driving forward, would I just keep going backward? Would I pass under the same overpasses over and over again, in an endless loop? I grabbed my phone. No signal. Of course, there was no signal. I was in the middle of rural Indiana, and even when I did have signal out here, it was spotty at best. The CB radio crackled. I jerked my attention to it, hoping for another human voice, for someone who could tell me this was normal, or that they were experiencing it too, or anything. But what came through wasn't a voice. It was just sound. A low-frequency hum. Rhythmic, like something breathing. And beneath it, very faintly, the sound of multiple voices speaking in unison. Too quiet to make out individual words, but loud enough to know they were there. I turned off the CB. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely manipulate the dial. I had to make a choice. I could sit here in the middle of the highway hoping that another vehicle would come along, that I wouldn't get rear-ended by someone who didn't see me in time. Or I could keep driving forward, even though forward seemed to mean backward now. Or I could turn around. I could make a U-turn right here across the median and head back east. Maybe the loop only worked in one direction. Maybe if I went back the way I came, I could break free of whatever this was. Before I could second-guess myself, I checked my mirrors and cranked the wheel hard to the left. The truck protested. U-turns aren't something you do with a loaded semi, especially not on an interstate. But the highway was empty, and I didn't care about regulations anymore. I crossed the median, felt the truck tilt slightly as it navigated the grassy center strip, and then I was on the eastbound lanes, pointing back toward Ohio. The overpass that I'd just passed under was now ahead of me. I'd be going under it again, but from the opposite direction this time. Maybe that would make a difference. I accelerated, bringing the truck back up to speed. 40, 50, 60. The overpass approached rapidly. As I passed underneath it, the cold hit me again, and the echo began. But this time it was different. Instead of my engine's rumble, I heard something else entirely. I heard voices, clear and distinct, speaking in a language I didn't understand. They sounded urgent, desperate, like they were trying to warn me of something. The echo lasted 5 seconds, maybe 6, and then it cut off abruptly, replaced by complete silence. Not just quiet, actual silence. My engine made no sound. My tires on the pavement made no sound. The wind made no sound. It was like someone had hit a mute button on the entire world. I emerged from under the overpass into that terrible silence, and I looked at my GPS. Mile marker 178. I was back where I started. I'd driven under the overpass going east, and instead of moving to mile marker 177, I was at 178. The same marker. The same location. The silence broke suddenly, sound rushing back in all at once. My engine roared, my tires hummed, the wind whistled past my mirrors. But there was something added to it now. A sound that came from outside the truck, from somewhere behind me. It sounded like footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Something large moving across pavement. I looked in my mirrors but saw nothing. The highway behind me was empty, but I could still hear it. Footsteps getting closer, the rhythmic slap of something hitting asphalt. I punched the accelerator, the truck lurching forward. The engine screamed as I pushed it harder than I should, reaching 70, 75, 80 miles per hour. The speedometer needle climbed, and the footsteps behind me faded, unable to keep pace. Another overpass appeared ahead. I was trapped in a corridor of them now, one every mile or two, impossible to avoid. As I approached this one, I could see something on top of it. Multiple figures standing along the railing, all of them looking down. I was doing 80 when I passed underneath. The cold hit like a hammer. The echo was deafening, and the voices within it weren't speaking anymore. They were laughing. A chorus of laughter, distorted and wrong, echoing off the concrete and following me as I emerged on the other side. My GPS flickered again. Mile marker 178. I was stuck. I was trapped in this 1 mile stretch of highway, passing under these overpasses over and over again, and no matter which direction I drove, I ended up in the same place. The laughter from the echo was still going, not fading at all now. It filled the cab, filled my head, filled everything. I reached for the CB radio to turn it off, realized it was already off, realized the sound wasn't coming from the radio at all. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere, from the air itself. I saw the next overpass ahead, the one I'd already passed under 3 times. 4 times. I was losing count. And standing on top of it, visible in the glow of the sodium vapor lights, were dozens of figures. They were packed along the railing, shoulder to shoulder, all of them perfectly still, all of them looking down at the highway. Looking down at me. As I passed underneath, the cold didn't just hit me. It invaded me. I could feel it seeping into my bones, into my lungs, into my brain. The echo was no longer just sound. It was physical, pressing against me, holding me in place even as the truck continued to move forward. And in that moment, passing under that bridge for the 4th or 5th or 100th time, I heard the voices speak clearly for the first time. They weren't speaking English. They weren't speaking any language I recognized. But somehow, impossibly, I understood them. They were counting. counting down. And they were almost at 0. I don't remember making the decision to keep driving. My foot just stayed on the accelerator, pressing down, keeping the truck moving forward even though forward didn't mean anything anymore. The speedometer read 75, but I could have been going 5 or 500 for all the difference it made. The mile markers had stopped making sense. The road had stopped making sense. The laughter from the echo finally started to fade, diminishing slowly until it was just a whisper, then a memory, then nothing. But the silence it left behind was worse. In that silence, I could hear my own breathing, quick and shallow. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, too fast, too hard. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I checked my GPS again. Mile marker 178. Still, always. My odometer was still counting backward. 756, 402 miles now. I'd lost 30 miles somehow, even though I'd only been driving for maybe 4 hours total. Time itself seemed to be working differently out here, flowing in directions that made no sense. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 12:14 a.m. That couldn't be right. The last time I'd checked, it had been 11:47 p.m. That was at mile marker 173, before all of this started. I'd passed under at least a dozen overpasses since then, maybe more. That should have taken at least half an hour, maybe 45 minutes given how fast I'd been driving. But according to the clock, only 27 minutes had passed. I looked at my phone. 12:14 a.m., same time, 27 minutes. I'd been trapped in this loop, passing under the same overpass over and over again, for 27 minutes. Or had it been longer and the clocks were lying? Or had it been shorter and my perception was distorted? I didn't know. I couldn't know. All I knew was that I was still moving, still driving, and the next overpass was already visible ahead of me. This one looked different. Older, maybe, or just more weathered. The concrete was darker, almost black in places. There was no graffiti on the supports, no rust stains, nothing to indicate that anyone had been near this structure in years. It looked abandoned, though that didn't make sense. Overpasses don't get abandoned. They're part of the infrastructure. They get maintained, repaired, replaced, if necessary. But this one looked forgotten. As I approached, I noticed something else. There was a car parked on the shoulder, just before the overpass. An older model sedan, dark color. I couldn't tell if it was blue or black in the darkness. No hazard lights, no indication that anyone was inside. I slowed down, my training as a professional driver kicking in despite everything else. A stopped vehicle on the shoulder could mean trouble. Someone could be hurt, could need help. Or someone could be having car problems, could flag me down. But as I got closer, I could see that the car was empty. The driver's door was open, hanging slightly ajar. The interior light was on, casting a pale yellow glow that looked wrong somehow, too dim or too bright or just off, in some way I couldn't articulate. I pulled up alongside it, stopped my truck, set my air brakes. I knew this was probably a mistake. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to keep moving, to not stop, to not investigate. But there was still a part of me, a stubborn part, that clung to the rules of the road. If someone was hurt, I had to help. That was the code. I grabbed my flashlight from the holder next to my seat and climbed down from the cab. The night air hit me, warmer than the cold I'd felt under the overpasses, but still carrying a chill. There was no wind. The air was completely still, like the world was holding its breath. My boots crunched on the gravel shoulder as I walked toward the car. I swept my flashlight beam across it, looking for any sign of damage, any indication of what had happened. The car was clean, well maintained. No dents, no scratches. The license plate was from Illinois. The registration sticker showed it was current, paid up through the end of the year. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded strange in the stillness, too loud and too quiet at the same time. "Anyone here? You need help?" No response. Just the soft ticking of the car's engine cooling down, a sound that suggested it had been running recently. The keys were still in the ignition, turned to the off position. I approached the open driver's door cautiously. The interior was as clean as the exterior. No trash, no personal items, nothing to suggest who owned this vehicle or where they'd gone. There was a faint smell, though, something chemical, sharp, like ozone or chlorine. It made my nose wrinkle. I looked around, shining my flashlight across the surrounding area. We were still in the middle of nowhere, farmland stretching out on both sides of the highway. No buildings, no lights, no sign of civilization except for the road itself and the overpass looming ahead. The overpass. I turned my flashlight on it, and the beam illuminated the concrete supports. They were covered in something. At first I thought it was moss or algae, but as I looked closer, I realized it was marks. Thousands of marks, scratched or carved into the concrete covering every inch of the supports. They looked like tally marks, the kind you make to count things. Groups of 4 vertical lines with a 5th diagonal line crossing through them. But there were so many. The entire support structure was covered in them, layer upon layer, some fresh and deep, some old and weathered. Someone had been counting something here for a long time. A sound made me spin around, the crunch of gravel behind me. I whipped my flashlight in that direction, expecting to see someone. The owner of the car, maybe, or another driver who'd stopped to help. But there was nothing, just my truck, sitting on the shoulder with its lights on, and beyond it, empty highway stretching east into darkness. "Hello," I called again. "I'm a trucker. I stopped because I saw your car. You okay?" Still no response. But I could feel it now, that sensation of being watched. The same feeling I'd had when I saw the figure on the overpass earlier. Someone was out here with me. I just couldn't see them. I backed toward my truck, keeping my flashlight moving, sweeping across the darkness. My free hand found the handle of the cab door, and I pulled it open, ready to climb back inside and get the hell out of here. That's when I heard it. A voice coming from the direction of the overpass. Quiet, barely audible, but unmistakably there. It was counting. 78, 77, 76. I froze, 1 foot on the running board. The voice was male, older, with a raspy quality like someone who'd been talking for too long. And it was counting backward, each number spoken with the same flat, emotionless tone. 75, 74, 73. I climbed into the cab quickly and slammed the door. My hands found the gear shift, released the air brakes. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning slightly on the gravel before finding purchase on the pavement. Behind me, I could still hear the voice, even through the closed door and over the sound of my engine. 72, 71, 70. I accelerated, putting distance between myself and that abandoned car, between myself and that voice. My headlights swept across the overpass as I approached it, and I saw something that made my breath catch. The tally marks on the supports were glowing, not brightly, just a faint phosphorescent blue, like glow-in-the-dark paint. They pulsed slowly, rhythmically, in time with the counting voice I could no longer hear, but could still feel in my bones. I passed under the overpass at 60 miles per hour, and the cold hit me like before. But this time it brought something else with it. Images, flashes of things I couldn't quite process. A truck, older than mine, jackknifed under this same bridge. The cab crushed, the trailer twisted at an unnatural angle. A car wrapped around one of the supports. The metal crumpled like paper. A figure standing in the middle of the highway, arms raised, mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. The images came too fast, overlapping, blurring together. And through it all, that voice, still counting, 69, 68, 67. The echo this time was different. It wasn't just my engine, it was everything. The crunch of metal, the squeal of tires, the sound of breaking glass. All of it compressed into one terrible cacophony, following me as I emerged from under the bridge. I looked at my GPS. Mile marker 178. Of course. I let out a laugh that sounded slightly hysterical even to my own ears. What had I expected? That stopping would change anything? That investigating an abandoned car would somehow break the loop? The highway stretched ahead of me, and I could already see the next overpass in the distance. The same one. Always the same one, no matter how many times I passed under it, no matter which direction I drove. My CB radio crackled to life, even though I'd turned it off. Static at first, then slowly resolving into a voice. Not the counting voice. Something different. Dalton? Dalton Reed, you copy? I grabbed the handset, my fingers fumbling with it in my haste. Yes, I copy. Who is this? More static then. This is dispatch, Dalton. We've been trying to reach you for the past 3 hours. Where are you? 3 hours. But my clock said I'd only been driving for 4.5 hours total, and most of that had been before the loop started. I'm on I-70 in Indiana, I said. Westbound. Mile marker 178. A pause. Dalton, that doesn't make sense. According to your GPS tracking, you should be near mile marker 230 by now. You should be approaching the Illinois border. I looked at my GPS again, still showing 178. But what if dispatch was seeing something different? What if the truck's built-in GPS, the one that transmitted my location back to the company, was showing my actual position? I'm reading mile marker 178 on my end, I said. My GPS is showing 178. That's not what we're seeing, Dalton. We're showing you at 178, then 179, then back to 178, then up to 180, then back to 178 again. Your signal is jumping all over the place. Are you having equipment problems? I don't know. Something's wrong with this stretch of highway. What kind of wrong? Is there an accident? Road closure? How could I explain? How could I tell them that I was trapped in a loop? That I kept passing under the same overpass? That time was broken and distance meant nothing? There are these overpasses, I started, knowing how crazy I'd sound. When I drive under them, I hear things. The echo lasts too long, and I keep ending up at the same mile marker, no matter which direction I drive. Silence on the other end. Long enough that I thought I'd lost the signal. Then, Dalton, when was the last time you slept? I wanted to scream. They thought I was hallucinating from fatigue. They thought I was having some kind of episode. I'm not tired, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. I know how this sounds, but something is genuinely wrong out here. Can you track any other trucks on this stretch of highway? Anyone else westbound on I-70 in Indiana? Another pause. I could hear keyboard clicking, someone checking something on a computer. We have a driver named Briggs who should be about 30 miles ahead of you, approaching mile marker 210. Want me to patch you through to him? Yes, please. More clicking. The static on the CB changed quality, and then a new voice came through. This is Briggs. Dispatch said you wanted to talk? Briggs, this is Dalton Reed. I'm westbound on 70, somewhere in Indiana. You been through mile marker 178 tonight? 178? Yeah, I think so. Maybe an hour ago? Why? Did you notice anything unusual about the overpasses around there? Anything weird about the echoes when you drove under them? A long pause. Are you messing with me? No, I'm serious. Did you notice anything? Dalton, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not in the mood. Drive safe out there. The connection cut off. Briggs had disconnected, probably thought I was pranking him or having some kind of breakdown. Dispatch came back on. Dalton, I need you to pull over at the next rest stop and take a break. Get some sleep. You sound like you're in no condition to continue driving. I can't pull over, I said. There's no rest stop. There's nothing. Just highway and overpasses. According to the map, there's a rest area at mile marker 185, 7 miles ahead of you. Can you make it that far? 7 miles ahead. But I couldn't get past mile marker 178. I couldn't move forward at all. I'll try, I said, because what else could I say? Good. Check in when you get there. And Dalton, consider this a mandatory rest period. You're not to continue driving until you've had at least 4 hours of sleep. Understood? Understood. The CB went silent. I was alone again, with just the sound of my engine and the road, and the next overpass approaching in the distance. The voice I'd heard earlier, the one that had been counting, was gone. But I had the feeling it would be back. And when it reached 0, when the countdown ended, something would happen. I just didn't know what. I passed under the overpass. The cold, the echo, the images of crashes, of twisted metal, of screaming faces, all of it washing over me like a wave, then receding as I emerged on the other side. Mile marker 178. I looked at my fuel gauge. 3/4 full. I'd started with a full tank, and I should have burned through maybe 1/4 of it by now, but the gauge had barely moved. Time wasn't moving normally. Distance wasn't moving normally. And now, fuel consumption wasn't normal either. The rules of reality, the basic physical laws that governed how the world worked, didn't apply here. Or they applied differently. Or they were being overridden by something else, something I couldn't understand or fight against. I thought about the tally marks on the overpass supports. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. How long would it take to carve that many marks? Years, decades maybe. Had someone else been trapped here before me? Had they spent years in this loop, marking time, counting, waiting for something? And if they had, where were they now? The highway ahead was empty. No other vehicles, no signs of life. Just me and the road and the overpasses that I couldn't escape. I drove for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My clock wasn't reliable anymore. Every time I looked at it, the numbers seemed different. Sometimes showing 12:14 a.m., sometimes 12:47. Sometimes 11:52, jumping forward and backward with no pattern I could discern. My phone was the same. The time on it changed every time I checked it, and when I tried to use it to make a call, I got nothing. No signal, no service, just a blank screen that occasionally flickered with static. I passed under the overpass again, and again, and again. Each time, the cold got a little colder. The echo got a little longer. The images in my mind got a little clearer. I started to recognize some of them. The jackknifed truck I'd seen in the flash of images. I'd read about that crash years ago. It had happened on I-70 in Indiana, under an overpass. The driver had fallen asleep at the wheel, swerved to avoid something, and lost control. He'd died instantly. The crumpled car wrapped around the support. That had been in the news too. A family of 4 traveling west, hit by a drunk driver who'd crossed the median. They'd spun out and hit the overpass support at 80 miles per hour. No survivors. The figure with its arms raised, screaming, I didn't recognize that one. But I had the terrible feeling that I would. That eventually I'd see a news report or read an article about someone who died on this stretch of highway, and I'd realize I'd seen their death before it happened. Or maybe I was seeing it happen now, in some parallel present, some alternate timeline where the crash was always occurring, endlessly repeating under these bridges. I shook my head, trying to clear it. That kind of thinking would drive me insane. I needed to focus on practical things, on finding a way out of this loop. The next time I approached the overpass, I tried something different. Instead of driving straight through, I slowed way down, creeping forward at 10 miles per hour. Maybe, if I went slow enough, I could, I don't know, see something I'd missed. Find a clue, an escape route, something. But as I entered the space under the bridge at that slow speed, the cold intensified. It was like sinking into ice water, like the temperature was proportional to how long I spent under the structure. My breath came out in visible clouds, and frost started forming on the inside of my windshield. The echo, at this slow speed, was different too. Instead of a single rolling rumble, it became a series of distinct sounds. Individual components that made up the whole. I could hear. My engine, yes, but also other engines. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all running at once. The sound of trucks, cars, motorcycles, all passing through this space, all existing simultaneously. Voices. People talking, shouting, screaming. Some crying, some laughing. All of them overlapping, creating a wall of human sound. Music. Radios from different eras playing different songs. I caught snatches of big band music, rock and roll, country, rap, all bleeding together. And underneath it all, that counting voice, still going, still reducing the numbers one by one. 47, 46, 45. I accelerated suddenly, unable to take it anymore. The truck surged forward, and I burst out from under the overpass back into the relatively warmer night air. Mile marker 178. I pounded the steering wheel in frustration, the horn blaring briefly before I released it. This was impossible. This couldn't be happening. There had to be a rational explanation, something I was missing, some way to break free. Think, I told myself. Think like a trucker. What do you do when you're lost? You find a landmark, you orient yourself, you figure out where you went wrong. But I wasn't lost. I knew exactly where I was. Mile marker 178, I-70 westbound Indiana. I knew the road, knew the route, had driven it hundreds of times. What do you do when your equipment fails? You troubleshoot. You check the obvious things first. My GPS could be malfunctioning. Okay, but my odometer was too, and the mile marker signs I kept seeing, those were physical objects, not electronic systems that could glitch. What do you do when you can't trust your instruments? You navigate by dead reckoning. You pay attention to the world around you, to the position of the sun or the stars, to landmarks and terrain features. But it was night, and the stars were hidden behind a layer of thin clouds. And there were no landmarks, just flat farmland and empty highway and overpasses. The overpasses. They were the constant. They were the one thing that appeared in every loop. The one thing that seemed to be at the center of whatever was happening. What if I didn't go under them? What if I turned off before reaching one? I looked ahead. The next overpass was visible in the distance. And between where I was and where it stood, there was an exit. I could see the green sign reflecting in my headlights. Exit 177, some county road I'd never heard of. I'd never tried taking an exit before. I'd always driven straight through, too focused on maintaining my route, on getting to my destination. But maybe that was the key. Maybe the loop only worked if I stayed on the interstate. I put on my turn signal, a reflex, even though there was no one else on the road, and guided the truck onto the exit ramp. The ramp curved to the right, leading away from the highway. I could see a stop sign ahead, and beyond that, a two-lane county road disappearing into darkness. No lights, no buildings, nothing. But it was away from the interstate, away from the overpasses. I slowed for the stop sign, came to a complete stop, and sat there for a moment. The truck idled, the engine making its familiar rumble. Normal sounds, normal physics. Everything felt right again, felt real. I looked at my GPS. It had frozen, showing no data, just a blank map with a blinking cursor. I looked at my mirrors. The interstate was behind me, elevated slightly. I could see the overpass I'd been trapped under, maybe a quarter-mile back. The sodium vapor lights on top of it cast that orange glow, and for a moment I thought I saw figures standing along the railing again. But when I looked harder, there was nothing. Okay, I was off the interstate. I'd broken the loop, or at least stepped out of it temporarily. Now what? The county road ahead could lead anywhere. It might run parallel to I-70, might rejoin it further west. Or it might go north or south, might take me miles out of my way. I didn't have a detailed map of this area, and my GPS wasn't working. But anything was better than that loop. Anything was better than passing under that overpass one more time. I turned left onto the county road, choosing randomly. West seemed like the right direction, though I wasn't sure if this road actually went west. The pavement was rougher here, older, with cracks and potholes that made the truck jostle and bounce. I drove for maybe 2 miles. The farmland continued on both sides, unchanged. The road was straight, no curves, no intersections, just a narrow strip of asphalt cutting through fields. And then ahead of me I saw it, an overpass. This one crossed over the county road, a smaller structure than the ones on the interstate, but unmistakably the same type of bridge. County road to county road, one crossing over the other. My heart sank. I'd thought I could escape by leaving the interstate, but the overpasses were everywhere. This whole region was crisscrossed with them. Roads passing over and under each other in an endless network. I slowed down as I approached. This overpass looked different from the ones on I-70. It was older, more weathered. The concrete was cracked and stained. There were no lights on it, no graffiti, no tally marks that I could see. Maybe it would be different. Maybe whatever was happening only affected the interstate. I passed underneath it at 30 miles per hour, holding my breath. The cold hit me immediately. Colder than before, if that was even possible. The temperature in the cab dropped so fast that the windows fogged over instantly, obscuring my view. The echo was immediate and overwhelming, but this time there were no other sounds mixed in. No voices, no music, no crashes. Just one sound, repeating endlessly. My own voice, saying my name. Dalton, 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 Dalton. Over and over, in perfect rhythm, in my exact tone and inflection, like a recording of myself played back at me from the concrete structure above. I emerged from under the bridge, and the echo continued. It followed me down the county road, my own name chasing me, called out by my own voice. Dalton, Dalton, Dalton. I looked at the road ahead, and my blood turned cold. The county road was gone. Instead, I was on the interstate again. The pavement had widened, the yellow dashes had returned, and ahead of me, clear as day, was the overpass at mile marker 178. I was back on I-70. I'd never left. The exit ramp, the county road, the smaller overpass, had any of it been real? Or had I hallucinated the whole thing, driven in a circle without realizing it? My own voice was still echoing, still calling my name. Dalton, 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 I screamed. the sound tearing from my throat, and slammed both hands on the steering wheel. The truck swerved slightly and I corrected, barely, my training overriding my panic. Get control of yourself. You're a professional driver. You've been doing this for 11 years. You don't lose your shit on the road. But I was losing it. I could feel it slipping away, my sanity, my grip on reality. Because reality wasn't working anymore. The rules didn't apply. The overpass loomed ahead. The same one. Always the same one. And the counting voice was back, louder than before. 23, 22, 21. It was almost at 0. The countdown was almost complete. And I had no idea what would happen when it reached the end. I passed under the overpass for what must have been the 50th time, maybe the 100th. I'd lost count. The cold wrapped around me like a physical thing now, like hands made of ice gripping my chest, my throat, my lungs. Each breath felt like inhaling knives. The echo had changed. It was no longer just sound. It had become something else. Something that existed in more than 3 dimensions. Something that pressed against reality from a direction I couldn't name. I felt it pushing against my thoughts, trying to reshape them, trying to make me understand something that my human brain wasn't equipped to process. 17, 16, 15. The counting voice was everywhere now. It came from the CB radio even though it was off, from the vents in the dashboard, from the spaces between the metal panels of the cab. It vibrated through the steering wheel into my hands, through the floor into my feet. It was inside me, counting down in time with my heartbeat. Mile marker 178. Still, always. My odometer had stopped moving entirely. 756 401 miles, frozen. The numbers no longer clicking backward or forward. Time on my clock jumped randomly. 12:47, then 11:32, then 1:15, then 12:03. My phone screen showed only static now, a gray-white snow that hurt to look at. I'd been driving for hours, or minutes, or days. I couldn't tell anymore. The images that flashed through my mind every time I passed under the overpass had become more vivid, more detailed. I wasn't just seeing crashes anymore. I was experiencing them. I felt the impact as the jackknifed truck hit the bridge support, felt the steering wheel crush my chest, felt the instant of absolute knowledge that I was about to die. I felt the car spinning out of control, the drunk driver's truck slamming into my side, the world tumbling over and over until it ended with a terrible crunch against concrete. I felt myself standing in the middle of the highway, arms raised, screaming at something that couldn't hear me, couldn't save me, as headlights approached and didn't slow down and didn't stop, and each time I came back to myself, I was still driving, still moving forward, still trapped. 12, 11, 10, the figures on top of the overpasses had multiplied. Now they lined both sides of the bridge, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They stood perfectly still, perfectly silent, watching me pass beneath them. I couldn't make out any features, couldn't tell if they were men or women, young or old, even if they were alive or something else. But I could feel their attention on me. Heavy, focused, waiting for the countdown to reach 0. I tried screaming again just to hear a sound that wasn't the echo or the counting or my own name repeating endlessly. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. Or, if it did, I couldn't hear it over everything else. The highway ahead started to look different. The pavement began to shimmer, like heat waves rising off summer asphalt, except it was cold and dark. The white fog line on the shoulder blurred and duplicated, so I was seeing 2 lines, 3 lines, 4, all slightly offset from each other. I was seeing multiple versions of the highway, overlapping, existing in the same space simultaneously. In one version, the road was empty, just like it had been all night. In another, there were cars, dozens of them, all stopped, all empty, their doors hanging open just like the sedan I'd investigated earlier. In a third, there were trucks, big rigs like mine, parked at odd angles across both lanes, abandoned, some of them with their engines still running, headlights cutting through the darkness. In a fourth, there was nothing, just bare earth where the highway should be, as if the road had never been built, as if all of this infrastructure was temporary, a thin veneer over something older and darker. All of these versions flickered in and out of existence, and I was driving through all of them at once, my truck existing in multiple realities simultaneously. 7, 6, 5. The overpass ahead looked different now, too. It was changing, morphing, becoming something that hurt to look at. The concrete supports twisted and bent at impossible angles, defying physics and geometry. The structure above me seemed to be made of shadows as much as substance, darkness compressed into solid form, and the tally marks, those thousands upon thousands of tally marks carved into the supports, were moving. They shifted and crawled across the concrete like living things, rearranging themselves, forming patterns that almost made sense, almost looked like words or symbols or diagrams. I recognized some of the patterns. I'd seen them before in books I'd read, in documentaries I'd watched. Ancient symbols, the kind that archaeologists found in caves and ruins and had no explanation for. Spirals and concentric circles and angular shapes that appeared in cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. They meant something. They were trying to tell me something, but I couldn't understand. My mind kept sliding off them, unable to grasp the meaning. 4, 3, 2. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw something that made what was left of my sanity crack like thin ice. There was a truck behind me. My truck. The exact same Kenworth 900, dark blue with rust on the driver's side door. The same license plate, the same worn stickers on the bumper. I was following myself, or myself was following me, or we were the same truck existing in two places at once, caught in a loop so tight that I could see my own past self catching up to my present self. The truck behind me was maybe 50 yards back, matching my speed exactly. I could see someone in the driver's seat. A man who looked like me. He was staring straight ahead, hands on the wheel, face locked in an expression of absolute terror. His mouth was open like he was screaming, but no sound reached me. How many times had I passed under that overpass? How many loops had I completed? And was each loop creating a new version of me, another Dalton Reed trapped in this same moment, all of us driving the same route forever? 1. The countdown had reached its end. The voice spoke the final number with a sense of finality, of completion, of something ending and something else beginning. The overpass ahead was fully transformed now. It wasn't made of concrete anymore. It was made of something else, something that reality couldn't quite contain. It existed in the space above the highway, but also in other places, other dimensions, all of them occupying the same location. I could see through it to somewhere else. Another highway maybe, or the same highway but different. The road was red instead of black. The sky was the wrong color, a deep purple that hurt to look at. And there were things moving on that road, vehicles that weren't trucks or cars but something else, shapes that defied description. I was about to pass under it. I couldn't stop. My foot wouldn't move from the accelerator. My hands wouldn't turn the wheel. I was locked into this course, compelled to complete the loop one more time. As I entered the space beneath the transformed overpass, everything changed. The cold wasn't just cold anymore. It was the absence of heat, the absence of energy, the absence of everything. I felt myself slowing down. Not just my truck, but my body, my thoughts, my heartbeat. Time itself was grinding to a halt. The echo that wrapped around me wasn't sound. It was meaning, information, knowledge being forced into my brain faster than I could process it. I understood, for a brief instant, what this place was, what the overpasses represented, why they echoed the way they did. They were thin spots, places where the boundaries between realities became permeable, where the normal laws of physics broke down. Every highway overpass was a potential gateway, a crack in the structure of space and time. Most of them were stable, harmless, but some, like this one, had been used too much, had too many deaths associated with them, had absorbed too much trauma and fear and pain. They became anchors, places where reality couldn't quite hold together, where the barriers between what was and what could be became dangerously weak. And I had driven into one. I had passed under it at exactly the wrong time, in exactly the wrong state of mind, and I'd become entangled with it. Trapped in its gravity well, unable to escape. The tally marks on the supports, they weren't keeping count of crashes or deaths. They were keeping count of loops. Each mark represented one passage, one circuit through this trapped moment. And there were tens of thousands of them because this overpass had been catching drivers for decades, holding them in endless repetition until their fuel ran out, or their minds broke, or they simply ceased to exist in any meaningful way. I was the latest, but I wouldn't be the last. All of this flashed through my mind in the instant I spent under the overpass, knowledge downloaded directly into my consciousness. And then I was through, emerging on the other side, and the knowledge started to fade like a dream upon waking. But I remembered enough. I remembered the important part. The countdown hadn't been counting down to an ending. It had been counting down to a reset. I looked at my GPS, mile marker 178. But this time, something was different. The number flickered, 178, then 179, then 178 again, then 179, then finally settling on 179. I'd moved forward, 1 mile, one single mile forward after hundreds of loops. My odometer clicked up, 736 to 402 miles. The clock on my dashboard showed 12:48 a.m. It stayed there, didn't jump or change. I'd broken free, or at least I'd cracked the loop, weakened its hold on me. Behind me, I could no longer see my own truck following. The highway was empty again, just one set of taillights receding in my mirrors. Ahead of me, another overpass was visible. Mile marker 180, probably. A different bridge, a different structure. I approached it slowly, cautiously, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stop, to turn around, to get off this highway by any means necessary. But I couldn't stop. Not yet, because I understood something else now, something the knowledge download had left me with. The loop wasn't about being trapped. It was about being tested, or maybe transformed, or maybe consumed. I wasn't sure which, and I didn't think it mattered. What mattered was that I'd survived it. I'd lasted long enough, endured enough passages, absorbed enough of the echo's meaning that the overpass had released me. Or maybe I'd changed enough that I didn't quite fit in the loop anymore. Maybe I'd become something slightly different, something that could exist in the normal world but wasn't entirely part of it anymore. I passed under the overpass at mile marker 180. There was no cold. There was an echo, but just a normal one, lasting maybe half a second. The sound of my engine bouncing off concrete and fading away. No voices, no images, no counting. Mile marker 181. I watched the number appear in my headlights, watched it pass beside me, watched it recede in my mirrors. I'd moved forward. I was free. I drove for another hour in a daze, barely aware of what I was doing. My body handled the driving, checking mirrors, maintaining speed, staying in my lane, while my mind tried to process everything that had happened. By the time I crossed into Illinois, the sun was starting to lighten the eastern horizon behind me. The darkness that had felt so absolute, so overwhelming, began to recede. And with it went the last remnants of that impossible night. I pulled into a rest stop just over the Illinois border and sat in the cab with the engine running, staring at nothing. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I'd survived something that shouldn't have been survivable. I'd escaped something that had no business existing in the first place, but I couldn't tell anyone about it. Who would believe me? I barely believed it myself, and I'd lived through it. Eventually, I turned off the engine and climbed into the sleeper berth. I needed sleep, real sleep, not the fractured, looping existence I'd been trapped in. But before I closed my eyes, I pulled out my logbook, the physical one I kept as a backup, with a pen, recording my miles and stops and delivery times the old-fashioned way. I flipped to today's date and looked at the entries. 8:30 p.m., departed Columbus, OH. 10:45 p.m., crossed into Indiana, 11:32 p.m., mile marker 143, and then nothing. No entries for the next several hours. Just blank space where I should have recorded my progress. I picked up my pen and started to write, started to document what had happened, every detail I could remember. But as I wrote, the words started to fade. The ink disappeared from the page as fast as I put it down, leaving blank paper behind. I tried again, pressing harder, writing faster. Same result. The words evaporated, refusing to exist in physical form. The overpass didn't want to be remembered, or couldn't be, or existed in a space that normal memory and normal documentation couldn't touch. I put down the pen and closed the logbook. Fine. I wouldn't write about it. I wouldn't tell anyone. I'd carry it inside me. A secret burden, knowledge of something that the world wasn't meant to know. But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying to myself, because I would remember. Every detail would stay with me, crisp and clear and undeniable. I would remember the cold, the echo, the counting. I would remember mile marker 178. And I would never, ever forget that for a few hours on a September night, I had been somewhere else, somewhere between, somewhere outside the normal flow of reality, somewhere that would always be waiting for the next driver who passed through at just the wrong moment. I delivered my load to St. Louis at 7:30 a.m., 2 hours late, but close enough that dispatch didn't give me too much grief about it. The forklift operators unloaded the hydraulic equipment, checked the manifest, signed off on everything. Normal, routine, like any other delivery I'd made in 11 years. I couldn't explain the delay. My logbook showed the gap in time, the missing hours between Indiana and Illinois. But when dispatch asked about it, I said I'd pulled over to sleep. Made up some story about feeling drowsy, didn't want to risk driving tired. They accepted it, wrote it up as a safety stop, commended me for making the right decision. I smiled and nodded and signed the paperwork, and all the while I could hear that echo in the back of my mind. Not loud, not intrusive, just there. A reminder of something that shouldn't exist but did. After the delivery, I had a choice. I could pick up another load, head back east, maybe retrace my route through Indiana. Or I could take a different way home, swing south through Missouri and Kentucky, avoid I-70 entirely. I chose the southern route. Not because I was afraid. I was, but that wasn't the reason. I chose it because some instinct told me that I shouldn't tempt fate. Whatever had released me from that loop had done so for a reason. and I didn't want to test whether it would catch me again. The drive back was uneventful. Normal traffic, normal weather, normal overpasses that I passed under without incident. Each one produced a standard echo that lasted less than a second. Each one was just concrete and rebar holding up a road, nothing more. But I found myself counting them anyway, keeping track of every overpass I drove under, making mental tally marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time I got home, I'd passed under 47 overpasses. 47 chances for reality to break again, for the world to slip sideways into that impossible space. It didn't happen. They were just bridges. I took a week off, told dispatch I needed personal time, didn't elaborate. They grumbled, but approved it. I spent those 7 days at home, barely leaving my apartment, trying to process what had happened. I couldn't watch TV. Too many commercials showing cars driving on highways, passing under overpasses. I couldn't read the news. Too many articles about traffic accidents, about crashes on interstates. Every story about a truck driver who died on the road made me wonder. Had they been caught in their own loop? Had they passed under the wrong overpass at the wrong time and never escaped? Or had they just suffered a normal accident? The kind of tragedy that happens on highways every day. I'd never know, and that uncertainty gnawed at me. On the 4th day of my time off, I tried to research it. I sat at my computer and typed searches into Google. I-70 Indiana Overpass. Mile marker 178 accident. Highway echo phenomenon. I found nothing. News articles about crashes, yes. Maintenance records for bridges, engineering reports on structural integrity, but nothing about loops. Nothing about time getting stuck. Nothing about the impossible thing I'd experienced. I tried more specific searches. Driver trapped under overpass, highway time loop, repeating mile marker. Still nothing. A few conspiracy theory websites, a couple of creative writing forums where people shared fictional stories about cursed roads. But no genuine accounts, no other drivers reporting the same experience. Was I the only one? Or had others experienced it but couldn't talk about it? Couldn't document it? Just like I couldn't write it in my logbook. Or had others experienced it and never escaped? That thought kept me awake at night. The image of other drivers, dozens or hundreds of them, still caught in loops on highways across the country, still passing under cursed overpasses, still hearing echoes that lasted too long, still watching their mile markers refuse to change, trapped forever in a single mile of highway, driving in circles until their fuel ran out, or their minds broke, or they simply faded away into nothing. On the 7th day, I got back in my truck. I had to. I couldn't quit driving, couldn't give up my livelihood because of one inexplicable night. I'd been a trucker for 11 years, and it was the only life I knew. But I changed my routes. I started refusing loads that would take me through Indiana. I avoided I-70 entirely, even the sections in other states. I found myself planning trips that minimized the number of overpasses I'd have to drive under, even if it meant longer routes and less efficient hauling. Dispatch noticed, but didn't say anything. Drivers have preferences after all. Some won't drive in winter weather, some won't take overnight loads, some refuse to go into major cities. Me, I won't drive under too many overpasses. It's quirky maybe, but not so unusual that it raises red flags. And for a while it worked. I drove for months without incident. Made my deliveries, earned my pay, lived my life. But I still heard it. The echo. Faint, but persistent, lurking at the edge of my perception. Every time I passed under an overpass, even the safe ones, even the normal ones, there was a split second where the echo lasted just slightly too long. A millisecond, maybe less. Imperceptible to anyone else, but crystal clear to me, and in that extended echo, I could hear it. The counting. Far away, muted, but still going. 99, 98, 97. It had started over. The countdown had reset and begun again. I don't know if it's counting down for me specifically or for the next driver who would get caught. I don't know if it's counting down to another reset or to something worse. I just know that it's happening. Somewhere out there on I-70 in Indiana, at mile marker 178. The overpass is waiting. The loop is ready. And someday, someone else will drive under it at exactly the wrong moment, and they'll experience what I experienced. Maybe they'll escape, like I did. Maybe they won't. 3 months after my experience, I was at a truck stop in Tennessee grabbing dinner at the attached diner. I sat at the counter eating meatloaf and mashed potatoes when another driver sat down next to me. He was older than me, maybe late 50s, with gray hair and weathered skin. He ordered coffee, black, and sat there stirring it even though he hadn't added anything. "You drive long haul?" he asked after a while. "Yeah," I said. 11 years now. "Ever run into anything strange? Out on the highway?" The question made my blood run cold. I put down my fork and looked at him properly for the first time. His eyes had a haunted quality, the look of someone who'd seen something that changed them fundamentally. "Strange how?" I asked carefully. He stirred his coffee some more, not meeting my gaze. "Overpasses. Ever notice anything weird about overpasses?" My heart was pounding. "What kind of weird?" "Echoes," he said quietly. "Echoes that last too long." We sat in silence for a long moment. Around us, the diner continued its normal operation. Other divers ate their meals, complained about traffic and dispatch and fuel prices. The waitress refilled coffee cups and took orders. Everything was normal. Everything except this conversation. "I-70?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "I-70, he confirmed. "Indiana, mile marker 178. "You got out," I said. Not a question. He was sitting here after all. He'd survived it. "Yeah, you too, I'm guessing." I nodded. "How many times?" he asked. "How many loops before you broke free?" I thought about it. I'd never actually counted, had been too disoriented, too terrified to keep accurate track. "I don't know. 100? More?" "I did 73, he said. "Counted every one. Thought if I kept count, stayed aware, I could figure out a pattern. Find a way to break the loop." "Did you? Find a pattern?" He shook his head. "No, it just let me go. After the 73rd loop, no reason I could figure." "The countdown," I said. "Did you hear it?" His hands tightened on his coffee cup. "Yeah. Got down to 0. That's when it reset. Let me move forward 1 mile. "The same," I said. "What do you think it means? What is that place?" "I don't know," he said. "And I don't want to know. I just wanted to meet someone else who'd been through it. Confirm that I'm not crazy, that it really happened." "It happened," I confirmed. We finished our meals in silence. Before he left, he turned to me one more time. "You still hear it?" he asked. "The echo, even on normal overpasses?" "Yeah. Me too. Been 5 years for me, and I still hear it. Still counting down, starting over, counting down again. You think it's going to call us back? Pull us in again?" He considered the question. "I don't know. But I avoid that stretch of highway, and I pay attention to the echoes. If one lasts a little too long, I get off at the next exit, find a different route. That's pretty much what I do too." He nodded, like he'd expected as much. "Drive safe out there. You too." He left. I never saw him again, never got his name, but knowing he existed, knowing I wasn't the only one, gave me a strange kind of comfort. I'm not alone in this knowledge. There are others who've experienced the loop, who've heard the countdown, who've survived the impossible. We're out here, driving the highways, carrying freight across the country. And we're listening, always listening to the echoes, waiting to hear if they'll last a fraction of a second too long. Because we know something that most people don't. We know that the roads we drive on, the infrastructure we trust, the concrete and asphalt and rebar, it's thinner than people think. The barriers between normal reality and something else are fragile. And sometimes, at certain places, at certain times, those barriers fail. Mile marker 178 on I-70 in Indiana is one of those places, but it's not the only one. I've started keeping a personal map, marking down locations where the echoes last a little too long, where the cold comes on a little too fast, where my odometer acts funny or my GPS glitches in specific ways. There are dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Thin spots scattered across the highway system, most of them harmless, some of them not. I share the map with other drivers when I can, when I meet someone who has that same haunted look in their eyes, someone who's experienced something they can't explain, can't document, can't prove, but knows in their bones is real. We have to look out for each other, because if we don't, who will? Last week, I was driving through Missouri on I-44. Late night, clear weather, light traffic, just me and the road and the gentle rumble of my engine. I approached an overpass at mile marker 189. Just a standard bridge, nothing special about it. I'd driven under it dozens of times before without incident. But as I got close, I felt it, that cold. Slight, barely noticeable, but there. And the echo, when I passed underneath, lasted maybe a quarter second longer than it should have. I heard, very faintly, beneath the rumble of my engine, 3,412, 3,411, 3,410, a different voice than the one at mile marker 178. A different countdown starting from a different number, but the same pattern, the same warning. I got off at the next exit and took back roads for 50 miles before rejoining the interstate. I marked mile marker 189 on my map with a red X. Another thin spot, another potential trap. It's happening more often now. Or maybe I'm just more attuned to it, more sensitive to the warning signs. Either way, I'm encountering these places more frequently, and the countdowns are getting lower. The one at mile marker 178 was in the double digits when I escaped. This new one in Missouri started at 3,412, but who knows how long it's been counting? Who knows how low it'll get before it resets? I don't know what happens when one of these countdowns actually reaches zero without letting its captive driver escape. I don't know if the loop just continues forever, or if something worse happens, and I don't want to find out. So I keep driving. I keep listening to the echoes. I keep marking my map and avoiding the thin spots and hoping that I can stay ahead of whatever is happening to the highways. Sometimes I wonder if I should quit, find a different line of work, something that doesn't involve driving under hundreds of overpasses every week. But I can't, because if I quit, who will watch for the thin spots? Who will warn other drivers, this is my job now, not just hauling freight, but mapping the danger zones, documenting the places where reality gets thin, even if that documentation only exists in my head and on a hand-drawn map that I can't show to anyone who hasn't experienced it themselves. It's lonely, but then driving trucks was always lonely. At least now, I have a purpose beyond just making deliveries. I'm a sentinel, a watchman, guarding against something most people don't know exists. And I'll keep doing it until the day comes when I hear an echo that lasts too long, and I can't escape in time, and I join all those other drivers who got caught in the loops and never came back. But not yet. Not today. Today, I drive. I listen. I watch. And I count. I still drive I-70 sometimes. Not the Indiana section, not anywhere near mile marker 178, but other stretches. Illinois, Kansas, Colorado. And every time I see an overpass ahead, just for a moment, I feel it. The anticipation. The fear. The terrible curiosity about what might happen if I let myself get caught again. Because part of me wants to go back. Wants to understand. Wants to see more of that impossible space between realities. To learn what the overpasses really are, and why they trap drivers and what the countdowns mean. But I resist. I keep driving. I pass under the overpasses quickly, listening to the echoes, counting them down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Someday I might stop resisting. Someday I might deliberately drive to mile marker 178 and pass under that overpass again, seeing if it will catch me, seeing what lies at the end of the countdown if you experience it fully and don't break free. But not today. Today, I have a delivery to make in Denver. The route takes me through Kansas, under 43 overpasses. I've counted them all on my map. Checked their echoes in my memory. They're all clear. All safe. Probably. I start the engine. The familiar rumble of the Kenworth fills the cab, and for just a moment, I hear something beneath it. An echo. Faint, distant. But there. 99, 98, 97. Still counting. Still waiting. I put the truck in gear and pull out of the rest stop. The highway stretches ahead of me, ribbons of asphalt disappearing into the distance, and somewhere out there, spaced along these roads like dark pearls on a string, are the overpasses. I'll drive under them all, I don't have a choice, but I'll listen to every echo, count every second, watch for the warning signs, because now I know what the overpasses are. They're not just bridges carrying roads over roads. They're doorways. Thin places. Cracks in the skin of reality. And something on the other side is counting down. When it reaches zero, really reaches zero, not just a reset, but an actual ending, something will happen. Something will come through. Or maybe something will pull us all through to the other side. I don't know which. I just know that I hear the countdown every day, every time I drive under an overpass. And it's getting lower. Always lower. Counting down to something that I hope I'll never see. But probably will. Someday. When the echo lasts just a little too long, and I can't escape in time, and the countdown reaches zero. I'll find out then. We all will. The GPS died at exactly 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday in October, somewhere between Pittsburgh and Cleveland. One moment it was showing my route in crisp blue lines across the screen, the next it was just black. No warning, no error message, just nothing. I tapped it a few times, the way you do when technology fails you. Like percussive maintenance might somehow fix a blown circuit board. It stayed dead. My name is Mason Briggs, and I've been hauling freight for 7 years. 7 years is long enough to know most of the major routes by heart, but not long enough to know every back road and alternate route in the country. I-80 through northern Ohio is a road I've driven maybe 30, 40 times. I know where the truck stops are, where the construction zones tend to be, which exits have decent food, and which ones you should skip. But I don't have it memorized. Not mile by mile. Not in the dark. The truck I drive is a 2015 Freightliner Cascadia, white with faded red lettering on the doors. She's got 640,000 miles on her, runs decent enough, though the transmission's been acting up lately, slipping between gears sometimes, hesitating when I ask her to shift. I've been meaning to get it looked at, but you know how it is. There's always another load, always another deadline, always a reason to put off maintenance until next week. I was hauling industrial parts that night. Fabricated steel components, maybe 5 tons worth, going to a manufacturing plant outside of Cleveland. The load was balanced well, sitting right over the tandems where it should be. No handling problems, no weird sounds from the trailer. Just a clean, straightforward haul. When the GPS died, I wasn't worried. I had my phone, and even though the battery was at 30%, that was enough to get me to Cleveland. I pulled up the Maps app, typed in my destination, and set it on the dash mount. The route matched what my GPS had shown. Stay on I-80 West for another 90 miles. Take exit 173 to I-480. Follow that for another 20, then surface streets to the plant. Simple. I'd done versions of this drive dozens of times. I was running behind schedule. Not drastically, but enough that I'd been pushing my speed a little higher than I should. I'd left Pittsburgh at 3 p.m., should have been in Cleveland by 11 p.m. at the latest. But I'd hit traffic near Youngstown, road construction that backed everything up for close to an hour. By the time I cleared that mess, it was already past 8 p.m., and I still had 100 miles to go. The sky was overcast, thick clouds blocking any moonlight or stars. The kind of darkness that makes the highway feel like a tunnel, with only your headlights to show you where you're going. No other traffic on the road, or at least, I hadn't seen another vehicle in 20 minutes. Just me and the pavement, and the darkness pressing in on all sides. Around 10:15 p.m., my phone started acting strange. The map display flickered. The blue dot that showed my position jumped ahead about 5 miles, then snapped back, then jumped ahead again. The estimated arrival time changed from 11:42 p.m. to 12:17 p.m. to 10:58 p.m., cycling through different times like the app couldn't decide what was real. I picked up the phone, thinking maybe the mount wasn't holding it steady. Maybe the vibration from the engine was causing some kind of glitch. But when I looked at it directly, the screen was fine. Steady image, clear display, no problems. Until I put it back in the mount. Then the flickering started again. I tried restarting the app. That helped for about 2 minutes. Then the same problem came back. I tried restarting the phone entirely. That took longer, almost a minute of staring at the Apple logo while the phone booted back up. And when the Maps app finally reloaded, it worked normally for maybe 5 minutes before the flickering resumed. Technology is unreliable. I've learned that over 7 years of driving. GPS units fail, phones glitch, CB radios cut out. You deal with it. You navigate by road signs and mile markers and the general sense of direction that you develop after enough time on the highways. So I stopped relying on the phone. I'd watch for the exit numbers, keep track of where I was manually. I-80 was a straight shot west, hard to get lost on. All I had to do was watch for exit 107.3, the one that would take me north to I-480 and then to Cleveland. The mile markers helped. They passed by regularly, lit up by my headlights for a moment before disappearing behind me. 197, 201. 205. I was making steady progress, even if my exact position on a map was unclear. Around 10:35 p.m. I saw the overpass ahead. It was a standard highway overpass, the kind you see thousands of times as a long-haul driver. 2 lanes of some county or state route crossing over I-80, carried by a concrete bridge maybe 30 feet above the highway. The supports were square and solid, painted that industrial gray-green color that all Department of Transportation concrete seems to be. There was graffiti on the pillars, tags and marks in faded spray paint. The kind of territorial pissing that taggers do on infrastructure they can reach from the ground. Nothing unusual about it. Nothing worth noticing. I passed underneath at 67 miles per hour, and my headlights lit up the underside of the bridge for maybe 2 seconds. The usual echo of my engine bounced back at me, that low rumble that happens when you drive through any enclosed space. It faded as I emerged on the other side, and I kept going, watching the mile markers. At mile marker 217, there was an exit. Not a major one, just a single off-ramp leading to some state route I'd never heard of. The green sign reflected my headlights. Exit 217 SR 534N, local traffic only. No gas stations advertised, no food, no lodging. Just an exit to nowhere. I kept going. Cleveland was still 50 miles ahead, and I didn't need to stop. But as I passed the exit, something made me glance in my side mirror. Just a reflex, just checking my surroundings the way you're trained to do. And in the mirror, I saw the overpass I'd just driven under. Except I hadn't driven under an overpass at mile marker 217. The overpass had been at least 8 miles back, maybe 10. I remembered passing it, remembered checking the mile marker right after. It had been at mile 209 or 210, somewhere in that range. But there it was in my mirror, receding behind me. The same square supports, the same gray-green paint, the same faded graffiti tags. I must have been mistaken about the first one. Must have misread the mile marker or not checked it at all. Easy mistake to make when you're tired and running behind schedule and your GPS is dead. I focused on the road ahead. The miles continued to click by. 19, 221, 225. The highway stretched out in front of me, empty and straight. Still no other traffic. The clouds above were getting thicker, and I thought I felt a few drops of rain hit the windshield, but it didn't develop into anything steady, just the occasional spatter. My CB radio was on, but quiet. The only sounds were the hum of my tires on asphalt and the steady rumble of the engine. I'd been listening earlier, catching bits of conversation from other drivers, but for the past half hour there had been nothing. Just static. Either I was too far from anyone else, or everyone had gone quiet for the night. At 10:52 p.m. I saw another overpass ahead. Same design as before. Same square supports, same gray-green paint. Even from a quarter-mile away I could see the graffiti tags on the pillars. The same tags I'd seen on the other overpasses. I slowed down slightly from 67 to about 60 as I approached. My headlights swept across the supports and I could see them clearly now. The tags were identical. Not similar. Identical. The same spray-painted designs, in the same locations, in the same colors. This was the same overpass. The exact same one I'd already passed under twice. But that didn't make sense. Overpasses are unique. Even when they look similar, even when they're built from the same basic design, there are always differences. Different graffiti, different weathering patterns, different stains from years of rain and exhaust. Unless someone had built 3 identical overpasses within 20 miles of each other, which seemed unlikely, but not impossible. I passed underneath it, and the echo of my engine was the same. That low rumble, bouncing off the concrete, lasting maybe 2 seconds before fading. Normal. Exactly what you'd expect. I emerged on the other side and checked the mile marker. 229. 12 miles since the last overpass. That was about right, actually. Overpasses aren't evenly spaced. They appear wherever roads need to cross, sometimes close together, sometimes far apart. I was overthinking this, seeing patterns where there weren't any. The stress of being behind schedule was making me paranoid. I reached for my water bottle, took a long drink. The water was lukewarm, slightly metallic tasting from sitting in the bottle for too long, but it helped. Cleared my head a little. The rain started for real around 11:05 p.m. Not heavy, but steady enough that I had to turn on my wipers. The rhythmic sweep of the blades across the windshield was almost hypnotic. Sweep, pause, sweep, pause. The mile markers continued. 203, 237, 241. I should have been approaching exit 173 soon, the one that would take me north to I-480 in Cleveland. I watched for it, ready to signal and move into the right lane. But when I reached mile marker 245, there was no exit 173. In fact, there were no exits at all, just highway stretching ahead, unbroken, no off-ramps or rest areas or turnarounds. I must have missed it. Must have been looking at my water bottle or adjusting my mirror or something, and the exit passed by without me noticing. Except I hadn't been distracted. I'd been watching specifically for it, waiting for the green sign that would tell me where to turn. My phone was still mounted on the dash, the map app still flickering uselessly. I picked it up, tried to zoom out, get a sense of where I was on the larger route. But the app was frozen now, showing a portion of highway with no labels, no street names, just gray lines on a white background. I restarted the app again. It took longer this time to reload, and when it finally came back, it showed me in the middle of Lake Erie. That was impossible. I was definitely on I-80, definitely heading west through Ohio. The lake was north of me, at least 30 miles away. I tried the GPS feature on the phone itself, not the Maps app. It took a minute to load, then showed my position as unknown, unable to determine location. Okay, fine. I didn't need the phone. I'd just keep driving west, watch for the next major exit, and figure out my route from there. Maybe I'd overshot Cleveland entirely, maybe I'd need to double back. It would cost me time, but I'd still make the delivery before morning. The rain picked up, coming down harder now. My wipers moved faster, struggling to keep the windshield clear. Visibility dropped to maybe 100 feet, just the immediate road ahead illuminated by my headlights. At mile marker 249, I saw the overpass again. The same one. I was sure of it now. The same square supports, the same graffiti tags, the same everything. It rose out of the rain ahead of me like something emerging from water, and I passed under it at 55 miles per hour. Spray from my tires kicking up on either side. The echo was longer this time. My engine's rumble bounced back at me and kept going, kept rolling for 4 or 5 seconds after I emerged. Long enough that I noticed it. Long enough that it felt wrong. But echoes could be strange in the rain. Sound traveled differently when there was moisture in the air, bounced off surfaces at odd angles. I'd heard weird echoes before, on other drives, in other weather conditions. I checked my mirrors and saw the overpass receding behind me through the rain. Mile marker 253 passed, then 257, then 261. No exits, no rest stops, no other vehicles on the road. Just highway and rain and darkness. My fuel gauge was showing 3/4 full. I'd filled up in Pittsburgh before starting the drive, and I should have burned through maybe a 1/4 tank by now. The gauge was reading about right, but something nagged at me. I'd been driving for over 3 hours. In 3 hours, at highway speeds, I should have gone close to 200 miles. Maybe more, given how I'd been pushing the speed limit. Yet, according to the mile markers, I'd only traveled from around mile 197 to mile 261. 64 miles in 3 hours. That couldn't be right. Even with the traffic jam near Youngstown, even with the reduced speed in the rain, I should have covered more ground than that. I looked at my speedometer. It showed 58 miles per hour. I looked at the road sliding past beneath me, the mile markers appearing and disappearing in my headlights. Everything seemed normal, seemed to match the speed I was traveling, but the numbers weren't adding up. At 11:23 p.m., my CB radio crackled to life. "Anyone out there on I-80 westbound? This is Nolan. I'm around mile marker 260. Anybody listening?" Relief flooded through me. Another driver. Someone else on this road, someone I could talk to, maybe someone who could confirm that I wasn't losing my mind. I grabbed the handset. "Nolan, this is Mason Briggs. I'm also westbound on 80, just past mile marker 261. Where you headed?" A pause longer than normal radio lag. Then, "Cleveland, you?" "Same, Cleveland. Delivery at a manufacturing plant, supposed to be there by midnight." "Yeah, me too. Different plant probably, but same city." "You having any problems with navigation?" "My GPS died and my phone's acting weird." Another long pause. "Yeah, same here. GPS went out about an hour ago. Phone's no help either. You seeing the overpasses?" My hands tightened on the wheel. The overpasses? Same bridge over and over. Or bridges that look the same, I can't tell. "You seeing that?" "Yeah," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "Same graffiti, same everything." "Thought I was going crazy," Nolan said. "Been passing under what looks like the same overpass every 8 or 10 miles, and there are no exits, no way off this highway." "How long you been driving this stretch?" "Since about 9:30, so almost 2 hours. And I've only gone maybe 40 miles according to the markers." The same problem I was having. We were both traveling at highway speeds, but covering distance way too slowly. "Have you seen any other vehicles?" I asked. "Any traffic at all?" "Nothing. Just empty road. You?" "Same." We sat in silence for a moment, the CB connection holding, neither of us quite sure what to say next. "What do you think is happening?" Nolan finally asked. I didn't have an answer. I had theories. Equipment failure, some kind of localized fog affecting our perception, exhaustion causing us both to hallucinate similar things, but none of those theories felt right. "I don't know," I said. "But I think we should stay in contact. Keep talking on the CB, let each other know what we're seeing." "Agreed. I'm going to try getting off at the next exit, if there is a next exit." "Let me know how that goes." "Will do." Nolan out. The CB went back to static. I set the handset down and focused on the road ahead. It was oddly comforting, knowing someone else was experiencing the same thing. It meant I wasn't hallucinating, wasn't suffering from some kind of break with reality. Whatever was happening was external, was real, was affecting both of us. But that comfort was short-lived, because if this was real, if something genuinely wrong was happening with this stretch of highway, then we were in trouble. Oh, at mile marker 265, the overpass appeared again. I slowed down even more, down to 45 miles per hour, and approached it carefully. The rain was still coming down, and my wipers swept back and forth, clearing the windshield just long enough for me to see clearly before the rain obscured everything again. The graffiti tags on the supports were more visible now that I was going slower. I could make out individual letters and symbols. There was a tag in red spray paint that looked like raise, or maybe rise. Below that, in blue, something that might have been initials. And on the right support, a simple design. A circle with a line through it. I memorized these details as I passed underneath. If I saw this overpass again, I'd be able to confirm it was the same one, not just similar. The echo lasted 7 seconds. I counted them. My engine's rumble amplified by the concrete, bouncing back at me, following my truck as I emerged on the other side. 7 full seconds of sound that should have faded in 2. I grabbed the CB handset. "Nolan, you there?" Static for a moment, then, "Yeah, I'm here, what's up?" I just passed under another overpass. Same tags, same design. Echo lasted 7 seconds. 7. Mine lasted maybe 5 when I went under it last time. How many have you passed under so far? I thought about it. 5, maybe 6. I'm losing count. Same, and the mile markers are still increasing, but way too slow. I've been driving for another 10 minutes since we last talked, and I've only gone 4 miles according to the markers. Something's wrong with the distance, I said. Or with time, or both. What do you mean? I mean, we're traveling at normal speeds, 50, 60 miles per hour, but the mile markers aren't reflecting that. It's like the road is stretching, like the space between markers is longer than it should be. That doesn't make any sense. None of this makes sense, but that's what's happening. The CB went quiet again. I could hear the rain on the roof of my cab, a steady drumming that should have been soothing but instead felt oppressive. Mason? Nolan's voice came back. I just saw an exit sign. You did? What does it say? Exit 217, SR 534 North, local traffic only. My stomach dropped. That's the same exit I passed an hour ago, mile marker 217. But I'm at mile marker 269. The exit should be, I know, it should be 52 miles behind you, but it's not. I'm taking it, Nolan said. I'm getting off this highway. Whatever this is, I'm done with it. Wait, maybe we should, but he was already gone. I heard the change in his engine noise through the CB, the slight shift in tone as he decelerated. I heard his air brakes hiss. Then the CB went dead. Not static, not Nolan signing off, just complete silence, like the radio had been unplugged. I keyed the mic. Nolan? Nolan, you there? Nothing. I tried different channels, cycling through them one by one. Every channel was silent. Not even the background static that you usually get on CB radio. Just nothing. I was alone again. Mile marker 273 passed, then 277, then 281. The rain was easing up, tapering off to a light drizzle. I could see further now, maybe 200 feet ahead. The road was empty. No taillights from Nolan's truck, no headlights from oncoming traffic. At mile marker 285, I saw the exit sign. Exit 217. SR 534N, local traffic only. The same exit. At mile marker 285, where it had no business being, I slowed down, considering. Should I take it? Follow Nolan's lead, get off this highway? But Nolan had disappeared right after he said he was taking the exit. His CB had cut out, and I hadn't heard from him since. Maybe taking the exit was what triggered whatever had happened to him. Or maybe staying on the highway was the problem, and taking the exit was the escape. I couldn't decide. My foot hovered between the accelerator and the brake as the exit approached. At the last second, I stayed on the highway, passing the off-ramp. In my side mirror, I watched the exit recede behind me, and beyond it, barely visible in the darkness, I saw something that made my breath catch. There was a truck on the exit ramp. A semi pulled halfway off onto the shoulder, its hazard lights blinking. I couldn't tell the make or color in the darkness and rain, but it was there. Stopped. Abandoned. Was it Nolan's truck? Had he broken down immediately after taking the exit? I should turn around. I should go back and check on him. But I couldn't turn around. Not on the highway, not with a loaded trailer, and there had been no exits to turn around at, no crossovers in the median. I kept driving, telling myself I'd find the next exit, loop back, check on the truck I'd seen. But I knew, even as I thought it, that there wouldn't be a next exit. Or if there was, it would just be exit 217 again, leading to the same off-ramp, the same abandoned truck. The overpass at mile marker 289 looked different. It took me a moment to realize why. The graffiti tags were in different positions. The red Raise Rise tag was on the left support instead of the right. The circle with the line was missing entirely, replaced by some other symbol I couldn't make out in the quick glimpse I got while passing underneath. This was a different overpass, finally, a different one. Or was it the same overpass, changed somehow? Rearranged. The echo, when I passed under it, lasted 9 seconds. I counted them carefully, watching my rearview mirror the whole time, seeing the overpass recede behind me while the sound of my engine continued to bounce back from it. 9 seconds was impossible. Sound didn't work that way. Even accounting for weather and atmospheric conditions and anything else you could think of, an echo shouldn't last 9 seconds. But it did. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I forced myself to take deep breaths, to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help. I needed to think clearly, needed to figure out what was happening and how to get out of it. Mile marker 293, still increasing, still moving forward even if the rate was wrong. I checked my fuel gauge again. Still 3/4 full, exactly the same as the last time I'd checked, maybe 15 minutes ago. The needle hadn't moved at all. That wasn't normal either. 15 minutes of highway driving should burn through at least a 1/16 of a tank, maybe more depending on load and speed. But my gauge showed no change. Was it broken? Or was I not actually consuming fuel? The latter seemed impossible, but then again, everything about this night seemed impossible. At 11:47 p.m., my phone battery died. The screen went black mid-flicker, and when I tried to turn it back on, I got nothing. Not even the low battery symbol, just a dead piece of glass and metal. I was completely cut off now. No GPS, no phone, no CB radio that worked. Just me and the truck and the highway that wouldn't end. The miles continued. 297, 301, 305. Every 8 to 12 miles I'd pass under another overpass. Sometimes it looked like the original one, with the same graffiti pattern. Sometimes it looked different, with tags in different locations or different colors, but there was always an overpass. Always that square support design painted in gray-green, and the echoes kept getting longer. 11 seconds, 13 seconds, 15 seconds. By mile marker 317, when I passed under what must have been my 10th or 12th overpass, the echo lasted 23 seconds. Almost half a minute of my engine's sound bouncing back at me. Impossibly sustained, impossibly loud. And within that echo, I started to hear other things. Not words, not voices exactly, but patterns, rhythms, like there was some kind of information encoded in the sound, some message I was supposed to understand but couldn't quite parse. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushing my speed up to 70, trying to put distance between myself and the overpass. But the echo followed, staying with me, only fading after that full 23 seconds had elapsed. At mile marker 321, exit 211 appeared again. I almost took it this time. Almost slowed down and moved into the right lane. But I remembered the truck I'd seen on the exit ramp, abandoned and alone. I remembered how Nolan's CB had cut out right after he said he was taking the exit. Whatever was at the end of that off-ramp, I didn't think it led to safety. I stayed on the highway and watched the exit pass by. And once again, in my mirror, I saw a truck on the exit ramp. Different truck this time. Or at least in a different position. This one was fully on the ramp, not just halfway off the highway. Its headlights were off, its cab dark. How many drivers had gotten off at exit 217? How many trucks were stranded on that ramp? The thought made my skin crawl. Mile marker 325 approached. I realized with a start that I'd been driving for over 4 hours now. 4 hours that should have taken me close to 300 miles from Pittsburgh to Cleveland and beyond. But according to the mile markers, I'd only covered 128 miles. And I was nowhere near Cleveland. I was nowhere at all, trapped on an endless stretch of I-80 that recycled the same overpasses and the same exit over and over. My logbook was sitting on the passenger seat, a physical record of my hours and miles. I picked it up, flipped to today's page, and looked at my last entry. 9:47 p.m. Mile 197. GPS failure. I'd written that when my GPS first died. Below it, I'd meant to record more entries, times and locations, the standard documentation that every commercial driver is required to keep. But the space below that entry was blank. Not blank because I hadn't written anything. Blank because the lines were gone. The printed lines that had been on the page, the ones you write your entries on, had disappeared. It was just white paper now, smooth and unmarked. I flipped to the previous page. The lines were there, and my earlier entries from the past few days were visible and clear. I flipped forward to tomorrow's page. The lines were there too, ready to be filled in. But today's page, below my 9:47 p.m. entry, was just blank paper. I tried to write in the space where the lines should have been. My pen moved across the paper, leaving marks, forming letters. But as soon as I finished a word and moved on to the next, the previous word faded. The ink disappeared, absorbed by the paper or evaporating or simply ceasing to exist. I couldn't document this. Whatever was happening, I couldn't write it down. The logbook wouldn't allow it. Or something wouldn't allow it. I threw the logbook back onto the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel with both hands. My heart was pounding, my breath coming in short gasps. I was starting to lose it, starting to feel the edges of panic creeping in. Focus, I told myself. You're a professional driver. You've handled worse situations than this. Stay calm, stay alert, keep driving. But had I handled worse situations? What situation could possibly be worse than being trapped on an impossible highway, where distance and time didn't work correctly, where overpasses appeared over and over, where exits led to abandonment? At mile marker 329, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. Finally, another vehicle, another driver, someone else sharing this nightmare with me. The headlights were maybe half a mile back, closing slowly. I couldn't tell what kind of vehicle it was. Could have been another truck, could have been a car. But it was there, and it was real. And I wasn't alone. I reached for the CB handset, even though I knew it wasn't working. Tried to call out anyway. This is Mason Briggs, westbound on I-80. If anyone can hear me, I'm at mile marker 329, and there's a vehicle behind me. Please respond. Static silence. The headlights grew closer. I could see them more clearly now in my mirror. They were slightly different heights, the way truck headlights are, not the symmetrical pattern of a car. It was another semi. Relief washed over me. Another trucker. Someone who might have a working CB, or a working phone, or just the company of another human being who could confirm that this was really happening. The truck closed the distance between us, moving faster than I was. It pulled up behind me, maybe 50 yards back, and matched my speed. Just followed me, maintaining that distance. I tried the CB again. Driver of the truck behind me, this is Mason Briggs. Can you hear me? Are you experiencing the same problems I am? No response. I flashed my brake lights a few times, the universal signal for, I see you, let's communicate. The truck behind me flashed its lights back. Okay. Good. We could at least signal each other, even if voice communication wasn't working. But the truck didn't try to pass me, didn't try to pull alongside. It just followed, maintaining that 50-yard gap. At mile marker 333, we approached another overpass together. I passed underneath first, and the echo that came back was the longest yet. 37 seconds. More than half a minute of sound that rolled and bounced and seemed to gain complexity as it went, adding layers and harmonics that my engine alone couldn't possibly produce. The truck behind me passed under the overpass a few seconds after I did, and I watched in my mirror as it entered the space beneath the bridge, and didn't come out. I watched, waiting for it to emerge on the other side, waiting to see its headlights reappear. They didn't. The truck had entered the space under the overpass and simply stopped existing, or stopped being visible, or went somewhere else. I slammed on my brakes, bringing my truck to a stop right there in the middle of the highway. My air brakes hissed, and the truck shuddered as it came to rest. I stared at my rearview mirror, at the overpass receding behind me in the darkness. No truck, no headlights, nothing. But it had been there. I'd seen it. I hadn't imagined it. Had I? I sat there in the middle of the highway for 5 minutes, maybe 10. Engine idling, lights on, staring at my mirrors and waiting for the truck to reappear. Waiting for some sign that I hadn't just witnessed something impossible. The highway remained empty. No truck behind me, no traffic ahead of me. Just silence and darkness, and the gentle patter of rain that had started up again. Eventually, I knew I had to keep moving. Sitting here wouldn't accomplish anything. Wouldn't bring back the truck that had disappeared, wouldn't make my GPS work, wouldn't magically transport me to Cleveland. I released the air brakes and started driving again, bringing my speed back up to 60. The miles continued to pass. 337, 341, 345. My mind kept replaying what I'd seen. The truck following me, its headlights clear in my mirrors. The overpass approaching. The truck entering the space beneath the bridge and not emerging on the other side. Where had it gone? The same place Nolan had gone when he took exit 217? The same place all those abandoned trucks on the exit ramp had gone? Was there a pattern? Were vehicles disappearing when they made certain choices? Taking exits, passing under overpasses at certain times or in certain ways? Or was it random, arbitrary, just bad luck? I didn't know. I couldn't know, and not knowing was almost worse than the disappearances themselves. At mile marker 349, I saw something new. A rest area sign. Rest area 2 miles. Gas. Food. Restrooms. I'd been driving for over 4 hours without seeing a single rest area. Now, suddenly, there was one. Should I trust it? Should I pull off? But what choice did I have? My fuel gauge still showed 3/4 full, but I didn't trust that reading anymore. Didn't trust any of my instruments. For all I knew, I was running on fumes, and the gauge was just frozen at 3/4. And I needed to use the bathroom. Needed to splash some water on my face. Maybe grab some coffee if the rest area was actually open. Needed to ground myself in physical reality, in normal human activities that would remind me I was still alive and still sane. The rest area appeared at mile marker 351, just where the sign had promised. There were lights, sodium vapor lamps casting that familiar orange glow over parking spaces and walkways. I could see the building, a standard highway rest stop with restrooms and vending machines and maybe a small convenience store, but I couldn't see any other vehicles. The parking lot was empty. Not a single car or truck in any of the spaces. I signaled and took the exit ramp, slowing down as I approached the rest area. My headlights swept across the empty parking lot, across the building's glass front doors, across the picnic tables and trash cans that surrounded the structure. Everything looked normal. Everything looked exactly like every other rest area I'd stopped at in 7 years of driving, except for the absence of people. I pulled into a parking space near the building and set my air brakes. For a long moment, I just sat there in the cab, engine running, trying to decide if this was a good idea. but I needed to stop. Needed to get out, stretch my legs, use the bathroom. I couldn't just drive forever. I turned off the engine and climbed down from the cab. The night air was cool and damp, heavy with the smell of rain and asphalt. The sodium vapor lamps hummed above me, and somewhere in the distance I heard what might have been traffic on the highway, or might have been something else. The building's front doors were unlocked. They slid open automatically as I approached, and I stepped into a standard rest area interior. Tile floors, fluorescent lights, arrows pointing to the men's and women's restrooms. A vending machine area off to one side, and what looked like a small coffee bar that was currently closed. But something was wrong with it. The proportions were off somehow, like everything was slightly the wrong size or at slightly the wrong angle. The hallway to the restroom seemed too long, stretching further than it should. The ceiling seemed too high, the lights too far above me. I walked toward the men's room, my footsteps echoing strangely in the empty space. The echo didn't sound right, didn't have the crisp quality you'd expect from tile and concrete. It was muffled, absorbed, like the sound was traveling into the walls instead of bouncing off them. The restroom was standard. Sinks, urinals, stalls, everything clean and well maintained. I used the facilities, then went to the sinks to wash my hands. The water that came out of the faucet was cold. Not cool, cold. Almost freezing, like it had been sitting in pipes underground for years. I washed my hands quickly, then looked up at the mirror above the sink. My reflection looked wrong. Not drastically wrong, not obviously wrong, but wrong in subtle ways that I couldn't quite identify. The angle of my face was slightly off, maybe, or the way the light fell across my features. My eyes seemed darker than they should be, the shadows beneath them deeper. I looked tired, more tired than I felt. I stared at my reflection for a long moment, trying to figure out what was bothering me about it. And then I realized my reflection wasn't mimicking my movements quite right. When I raised my hand to touch my face, my reflection raised its hand a split second later. When I blinked, my reflection blinked after a tiny delay. The delay was barely noticeable, maybe 1/10 of a second, maybe less, but it was there, consistent. My reflection was lagging behind reality. I backed away from the mirror quickly, my heart pounding again. This was wrong. Everything about this place was wrong. I needed to get out of here, needed to get back to my truck and back on the highway, even if the highway was broken too. I walked quickly out of the restroom, through the main building, toward the exit. My footsteps echoed, that same muffled echo that sounded like it was being absorbed by the walls. Behind me, I heard other footsteps. I spun around. The rest area was empty. No one else was there. But I could still hear the footsteps. They matched my rhythm, matched my pace. When I stopped, they stopped. When I started walking again, they started again. I wasn't alone in this building. I ran, sprinted toward the exit doors, which slid open too slowly, forcing me to turn sideways and squeeze through before they were fully open. The parking lot outside looked different now. The sodium vapor lamps were dimmer, and there were shadows where there shouldn't have been shadows. The angles of the light didn't make sense, didn't match the positions of the lamps. My truck was where I'd left it, solid and real in the middle of all this strangeness. I ran to it, climbed into the cab, started the engine. The familiar rumble of the diesel motor was the most comforting sound I'd heard all night. I didn't bother with mirrors or turn signals. I just put the truck in gear and pulled out of the parking space, heading for the exit that would take me back to the highway. The exit ramp curved around, merging back onto I-80. I accelerated, putting distance between myself and the rest area as quickly as possible. In my side mirror, I watched the rest area recede behind me. The lights were flickering now, going on and off in no particular pattern, and I could see figures standing in the parking lot. Multiple figures, maybe a dozen or more, all standing perfectly still, all facing the direction my truck had gone. I looked away from the mirror, focused on the road ahead. I didn't want to know what those figures were, didn't want to know if they were human or something else. Mile marker 353. I was back on the highway proper, back in the weird loop of repeating overpasses and impossible distances. But at least I was moving. At least I was away from that rest area. My fuel gauge, I noticed, was now showing half full. It had dropped from 3/4 to half while I was parked at the rest area. That didn't make sense. I'd had the engine off for at most 15 minutes, and even with the accessories running, that shouldn't have drained much fuel. Unless time at the rest area had passed differently. Unless those 15 minutes I'd experienced had been longer in real terms. Or unless the fuel gauge was finally telling the truth, and I'd been running low this whole time without realizing it. Either way, I needed to be more careful about fuel consumption. If the gauge was accurate, I had maybe 200 miles left before I'd run out. And I had no idea where I could refuel, or if there were any gas stations on this cursed stretch of highway. The overpasses continued to appear at regular intervals. Every 8 to 10 miles there was another one, and the echoes when I passed under them were getting longer and stranger. 42 seconds. 48 seconds. 55 seconds. Almost a full minute of sound bouncing back at me, layered with those same rhythms and patterns that felt like they meant something but that I couldn't understand. At mile marker 365, I saw exit 217 again. This time, there were 3 trucks on the exit ramp. All of them parked at different points, all of them dark and apparently abandoned. I could see their shapes clearly in my headlights as I passed by. One close to the highway, one about halfway up the ramp, one at the very top where the ramp met SR 534. 3 drivers who'd made the same choice. Get off the highway, take the exit, hope for better luck on side roads. And all 3 of them had ended up stuck, or worse. I wasn't taking that exit. No matter how many times it appeared, no matter how tempting it might be to try a different route, I wasn't leaving the highway. Because at least on the highway I was still moving. Still making some kind of progress, even if it was slower than it should be. My CB radio crackled unexpectedly. Anyone out there? This is... can't. The transmission was broken up, barely audible through the static, but it was a voice, a human voice. I grabbed the handset. This is Mason Briggs. I can hear you, but you're breaking up. Repeat your last transmission. More static, then 217. Taken it 3 times. Keeps bringing me back. My stomach clenched. Say again, you've taken exit 217 3 times. Can't get off. Highway won't let me, always brings me back. Where are you now? What's your location? The static increased, drowning out any response. I tried adjusting the squelch, tried different channels, but the voice was gone. Lost in the electronic noise. Someone else was stuck in this loop. Someone who'd tried to escape by taking the exit, and the highway had brought them back. 3 times. How was that possible? If you took an exit, you left the highway. You got on side roads, headed toward towns or cities or wherever the exit led. You didn't somehow end up back on the highway you'd just left. Unless the exit didn't really go anywhere. Unless it was a loop of its own. A closed circle that looked like it was leading away but actually just curved back around. Or unless the highway wouldn't let you leave. That thought was more terrifying than anything else I'd considered. The idea that this wasn't just broken reality or malfunctioning physics, but something intentional. something that wanted to keep drivers trapped here. Mile marker 369 passed, then 373, then 377. I'd been driving I checked my watch, but it had stopped. The second hand was frozen, pointing at the 7. The digital readout on my dashboard clock was flickering between different times. 12:14 a.m., 11:52 p.m., 1:37 a.m., 10:05 p.m., cycling through them randomly. Time wasn't working anymore, not in any consistent way. How long had I been on this highway? It felt like hours, but it could have been minutes or days. I couldn't tell. My body felt tired, but not exhausted. Hungry, but not starving. Thirsty, but not desperately so. All of my physical needs seemed to be suspended at a medium level, neither increasing nor decreasing as time passed, or as time didn't pass. At mile marker 381, I saw something that made me slow down. There was a car on the shoulder of the highway. Not a truck, a regular sedan, maybe a Honda or Toyota. It was parked with its hazard lights on, and someone was standing next to it. A person, an actual person, not just a silhouette or a figure in the distance. I pulled over onto the shoulder about 50 feet ahead of the car, set my air brakes, and climbed down from the cab. The person near the car was a woman, maybe in her 30s, wearing jeans and a jacket. She looked up as I approached, and I could see relief on her face. "Thank God," she said. "I've been stuck here for hours. My car just died and I can't get it started again." I stopped a few feet away, cautious. "What's your name?" "Amanda. Amanda Hayes. Are you heading west? Can you give me a ride to the next town?" "There is no next town," I said. "Have you noticed anything strange about this highway? About the overpasses or the mile markers?" She looked at me blankly. "Strange how?" "The overpasses repeating. The exit that keeps appearing. The way the distance doesn't match up with time. I don't know what you're talking about. I just need to get to a phone, call for a tow truck. Can you help me or not?" Something about this wasn't right. Her demeanor was too normal, too calm for someone who'd been stuck on the side of a dark highway for hours. And she wasn't reacting to any of the weird things I was describing. "When did your car break down?" I asked. "Around, I don't know, maybe 11 p.m.? I've lost track of time." "What were you doing on this highway? Where were you headed?" "I was driving to Cleveland from Pittsburgh. Is that important?" "The same route I was on. The same route Nolan had been on." "Did you pass under any overpasses before your car broke down?" "I mean, yes, probably. There are overpasses on every highway. Why are you asking all these questions? Are you going to help me or not?" I looked at her car more closely. It was a newer model, clean and well-maintained. The hazard lights were blinking steadily. Nothing seemed damaged or broken from the outside, but when I looked at the license plate, my blood ran cold. The plate was blank, not removed, blank, like it had been painted over or covered, except there was no paint, no covering, just smooth metal where the numbers and letters should have been. "What's your license plate number?" I asked. Amanda looked confused. "What? Why? Just tell me. What's the number on your license plate?" "It's, She hesitated, looking uncertain. "I'm sorry, I can't remember. Is that weird? I should know my own plate number." "Amanda," I said slowly, "I don't think you're real." Her expression didn't change. "What do you mean?" "Of course I'm real. I'm standing right here talking to you. Your license plate is blank. You can't remember basic details. And you're not reacting to any of the impossible things happening on this highway. You're not making sense. Please, I just need a ride. Or at least use of your phone to call for help." I backed away from her, back toward my truck. "I can't help you. I'm sorry." "Wait," Don't leave me here. But I kept backing up, kept moving toward my truck. Because the more I looked at Amanda, the more I noticed small things that were wrong. The way her jacket didn't quite sit right on her shoulders, like it was a size too big or too small. The way her shadow, cast by my truck's headlights, didn't quite match her movements. The way her eyes were just a little too dark, a little too empty. I climbed back into my cab and released the air brakes. Amanda was walking toward my truck now, moving faster than she should be able to, her expression changing from confused to something else, something angry. "You can't leave," she shouted. "You have to help. You have to—" I pulled back onto the highway, accelerating hard. In my mirror, I watched Amanda standing on the shoulder, getting smaller as I drove away. She didn't move after that initial approach, just stood there watching me leave. And then she flickered. Like a bad video signal, her image stuttered and broke up. For a moment, I could see through her to the guardrail behind. Then she was solid again. Then she flickered again. Then she was gone entirely. The shoulder was empty, and there was no car with hazard lights, no stranded driver. Just empty road. Mile marker 385, still westbound, still trapped. The overpasses were coming more frequently now. Every 5 miles instead of every 8 or 10, and they were all starting to look the same again. Identical graffiti, identical structure, identical everything. The echoes, when I passed under them, were over a minute long now. 73 seconds, 81 seconds, 94 seconds. Almost 2 full minutes of sound following me, layered and complex, carrying within it those patterns that I still couldn't decode. At mile marker 393, my fuel gauge dropped to a quarter tank. At mile marker 397, it was at an eighth. At mile marker 401, the low fuel warning light came on. I had maybe 40 miles left. 50, if I was lucky, and the gauge was being pessimistic. 40 miles to find a gas station or way off this highway, or something. Because if I ran out of fuel out here, I'd be stuck. Another truck abandoned on the shoulder, another driver who'd gotten caught in the loop and couldn't escape. The CB radio crackled again. "Can anyone hear me? This is Nolan. I'm stuck. Please." My heart leapt. "Nolan, this is Mason. Where are you?" "Don't know. Took the exit. But I'm still... The overpass keeps..." "Nolan, listen to me. Don't take the exits. Stay on the highway. Do you understand?" "Can't stay. Out of fuel. Have to walk." "No! Don't leave your truck. Stay in the cab. Keep the doors locked." But the transmission was already degrading, breaking up into static. I tried to respond, tried to give more instructions, but I didn't know if he could hear me. The radio went silent again. Mile marker 405. My fuel gauge showing almost empty now. I was running out of time, running out of fuel, running out of options. And then, ahead of me, I saw something different. Not an overpass. Not an exit. Something else. A bridge. A massive bridge much larger than the overpasses I'd been passing under. It crossed over the highway like a cathedral, concrete and steel rising high above the road, carrying what must have been a major interstate or state route. And there were lights on it. Real lights, not the strange flickering lights of the rest area. The warm glow of actual traffic, vehicles crossing the bridge, going about their normal business. Normal reality was up there. Above me, just a few hundred feet away. I just had to reach it. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushing my speed up as high as I dared. The fuel gauge needle was touching empty now, the warning light flashing insistently. The bridge loomed closer. I could see the vehicles on it more clearly now. Cars and trucks moving at normal highway speeds, completely unaware of the impossible road beneath them. I was going to pass under that bridge, and when I did, maybe the loop would break. Maybe I'd be able to connect with that normal reality above me. Get back to a world where physics worked correctly and mile markers made sense and GPS units didn't die for no reason. The bridge was maybe a quarter-mile away now, close enough that I could see details, the concrete supports, the safety barriers along the edges, the road surface itself. And then I saw what was painted on the nearest support, spray-painted in red, in letters 10 feet high. Mile 217 has no exit. My truck passed under the massive bridge, and the echo that came back was like thunder, like the voice of God, like the sound of reality breaking. It lasted 3 minutes and 47 seconds. I counted every one. And when it finally faded, I checked my mile marker. I was back at the beginning. I let my foot off the accelerator and the truck coasted to a gradual stop. My fuel gauge was showing completely empty now, the needle resting at the very bottom of the gauge. The engine was still running, but it was only a matter of time before it sputtered and died. I sat there in the middle of the highway, hazard lights on, and tried to think. I'd driven for how long? Hours. It felt like hours, even though my sense of time had broken down completely. I'd passed under dozens of overpasses, seen the same exit appear over and over, watched other vehicles vanish, encountered what might have been a ghost or hallucination of a stranded driver. And now I was back at mile marker 217. The place where this had started, or close to it. The place I couldn't escape from. My logbook was still on the passenger seat. I picked it up and flipped to today's page. The last entry was still there. 9:47 p.m., mile 197. GPS failure. And below it, the blank space where I'd tried to write more entries but couldn't. Except now, the space wasn't quite blank. There was something there, very faint, like text that had been written and then mostly erased. I held the logbook up to the dome light in the cab and squinted at it. The faint text said, Mile 217 has no exit. Mile 217 has no exit. Mile 217 has no exit. Written over and over, filling the entire page, in handwriting that looked almost like mine, but not quite. The letters were too uniform, too perfect, like they'd been printed rather than handwritten. I dropped the logbook and leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I was having some kind of episode, some kind of breakdown. Or I died. Maybe I died hours ago, crashed on the highway near Youngstown or Pittsburgh, and this was, what, hell? Purgatory. Some kind of liminal space between life and death? That would explain why nothing made sense, why the laws of physics didn't work, why I kept encountering impossible things. If I was dead, then none of this mattered. I could just sit here and wait for whatever came next. But I didn't feel dead. I felt alive, alert, present. My body ached from hours of sitting in the driver's seat. My eyes burned from staring at the road. My bladder was full again, even though I'd used the restroom at the nightmare rest area. Dead people didn't need to use the bathroom, which meant I was alive, which meant this was real, or real enough that the distinction didn't matter, which meant I needed to keep trying to escape. My engine coughed, sputtered, then caught again and continued running. I had minutes left, maybe less. I put the truck back in gear and started driving again, slow now, conserving whatever fuel remained. I was at mile marker 217, and ahead of me would be the overpass, and beyond that, more highway. The same highway I'd been driving for hours. But maybe there was something I'd missed. Some detail, some clue, some way out that I hadn't noticed before. The overpass appeared ahead, the original one, with the graffiti tags in their familiar positions. Raise or rise in red. The circle with a line through it. All of it exactly as I'd first seen it. I slowed to a crawl as I approached it, maybe 15 miles per hour. My headlights illuminated every detail of the concrete supports, and I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Between the graffiti tags, carved into the concrete itself, were marks, thousands of them, covering every available surface. They looked like the tally marks I'd heard about from other drivers, the ones that appeared on structures sometimes. Groups of 4 vertical lines with a 5th diagonal line crossing through them. Marks that people made to count things. But these marks weren't just random. They were organized into sections, separated by deep grooves carved into the concrete. And each section had a label scratched above it in letters so small I could barely read them. Mile 200E. 17, mile 217. Mile 217, over and over. Each section marking a different instance of mile 217, a different iteration of this same stretch of highway, and the tally marks within each section numbered in the hundreds. Some sections had thousands. How many drivers had been caught here? How many vehicles had passed through mile 217, counting their passages, marking their attempts to escape? I was just the latest in a long line. Another truck, another driver, another set of tally marks waiting to be carved. I passed under the overpass at that slow crawl, and the echo was soft this time. Gentle, almost soothing, like a lullaby. It whispered to me in that echo, not words, not exactly, but meaning. You can't leave. This is where you are now. This is where you'll always be. I emerged on the other side and checked the mile marker. 4 miles forward. Progress, even if it was illusory. My engine coughed again. The power steering started to go as the engine lost pressure. I could feel the truck starting to die beneath me. I had maybe 2 miles left, maybe less. I kept driving, speed dropping to 10 miles per hour as the engine struggled. The mile markers passed slowly. 223, 225, and then I saw it. Something I hadn't seen before. A truck stop. An actual, honest-to-God truck stop, with fuel pumps and a building and lights and everything. It appeared at mile marker 227, right where it had no business being. I'd passed mile marker 227 multiple times during my endless loop, and there had never been a truck stop there before. But there it was now. Real, solid, ordinary. Was it a trap, like the rest area had been? Another layer of the nightmare designed to lure me in? Or was it genuine? A way out, a return to normal reality? I didn't have a choice. My engine was dying. I had maybe a quarter mile left before it quit entirely. I took the exit ramp, my truck barely maintaining enough speed to climb the slight grade. The power steering was completely gone now, and I had to muscle the wheel to make the turn into the truck stop parking lot. The fuel pumps were modern, well lit. The building beyond them looked clean and functional. There were other vehicles in the parking lot, maybe a dozen cars and 3 other semis. Normal vehicles, normal people, normal reality. My engine died just as I pulled up to the pump island. The truck coasted the last few feet and stopped, and I set the air brakes one final time. I sat in the cab for a long moment, breathing hard, my hands shaking on the wheel. I'd made it. I'd escaped. This truck stop was real. It had to be real, because if it wasn't, I had no more options left. I climbed down from the cab and walked toward the building. The asphalt beneath my feet was solid, real. The air smelled like diesel fuel and coffee. Normal truck stop smells. Inside, there was a convenience store area and a restaurant counter. There were people, a clerk behind the register, a couple of drivers sitting at the counter drinking coffee, someone browsing the snack aisle. Real people, with faces that looked normal, shadows that moved correctly, eyes that weren't too dark or too empty. I approached the counter. "Excuse me," I said to the clerk. What mile marker is this? What highway are we on? The clerk looked at me like I was crazy. We're on I-80, westbound, mile marker 227. Are you okay, buddy? You look like you've had a rough night. Mile marker 227, I repeated. And if I go back to the highway and drive west, I'll reach Cleveland? Eventually, yeah. Cleveland's about 70 miles west of here. You need some coffee or something? 70 miles, a normal distance. A distance that matched reality. I need fuel, I said. My truck ran out at the pump. Sure thing. You can pay here once you're done filling up. I walked back out to my truck in a daze. The fuel pump worked normally. I swiped my card, selected the grade, started pumping. The numbers on the pump display clicked upward at a normal rate. Gallons and dollars, increasing in lockstep the way they should. I filled the tank completely, paying more attention to the process than I ever had before. Making sure it was real, making sure this wasn't another illusion. When the tank was full, I went back inside to pay. The transaction went through without a problem. The clerk gave me a receipt, asked if I needed anything else, and wished me a good night. Everything was normal. Everything was real. I climbed back into my cab, started the engine. It caught immediately, running smooth and strong, and pulled out of the truck stop. The exit ramp led back to I-80, and I merged onto the highway heading west. Mile marker 229 passed, then 233, then 237. Different mile markers. Not the same ones repeating. Actually progressing, actually moving forward. I'd escaped. I was out of the loop. My fuel gauge showed full. My odometer was counting up normally. My clock displayed a steady time, 1:47 a.m. I'd lost 4 hours somehow. 4 hours between 9:47 p.m. when my GPS died and now. 4 hours of driving that felt like much longer, but that had only moved me forward about 70 miles. But I was moving forward. That was what mattered. I drove for another hour without incident. Normal highway, normal traffic, normal mile markers. I passed through the rest of Ohio and into Indiana, heading for Cleveland to make my delivery. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. Except when I checked my logbook at the next rest stop, the real rest stop with actual people and actual trucks, the pages were wrong. The entry I'd made at 9:47 p.m. was still there. Mile 197, GPS failure. But all the pages after that, tomorrow's page, the next day's page, all the way to the end of the month, were covered in faint text. The same text repeated over and over. Mile 217 has no exit. Mile 217 has no exit. Mile 217 has no exit. I flipped through the entire logbook. Every blank page had the same text, filling every line, written in that too-perfect handwriting that looked almost like mine. I threw the logbook away, dumped it in a trash can at the rest stop, and bought a new one at the convenience store. Started fresh with clean pages that had nothing written on them. But when I opened the new logbook to make an entry, the first page said, Mile 217 has no exit. I made my delivery in Cleveland at 7:30 a.m., 5.5 hours late but still within the acceptable window. The dispatcher grumbled but accepted my excuse of traffic delays and equipment problems. After the delivery, I had 3 days off. I drove home to my apartment outside of Pittsburgh and tried to rest. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw overpasses, heard echoes that lasted too long, felt the wrongness of that impossible highway. On the second day, I tried to research what had happened. I searched online for I-80 Ohio Strange Highway, mile marker 217 loop, highway disappearances. I found nothing. No reports of other drivers experiencing what I had. No local legends or urban myths about that stretch of road. I found accident reports, yes. Crashes and fatalities on I-80 in Ohio, some of them near mile marker 217 or other mile markers I'd passed through during my loop. But no mentions of repeating overpasses. No mentions of exits that led nowhere. No mentions of drivers getting trapped in impossible loops of highway. Either I was the first, or everyone else who'd experienced it had never made it out to tell the story. On the third day, I called dispatch and told them I was taking a medical leave. Indefinite duration. They weren't happy, but they approved it. I couldn't drive anymore. Couldn't get back in a truck, back on the highway, risk getting caught in another loop. Mile 217 had no exit, but I'd found one anyway, somehow. And I wasn't going to test my luck by going back. For 2 weeks I stayed in my apartment. Didn't drive, didn't go anywhere, barely left my building. And every night I heard the echoes, not loud, not obvious, just there at the edge of my hearing. The sound of trucks passing under overpasses bouncing back from concrete, carrying within them those rhythms and patterns that meant something, but that I still couldn't understand. The echoes were calling me back. After 2 weeks, I broke. I had to know, had to see if it was still there, if the loop was still active, if I'd really escaped, or if I was just in a temporary reprieve. I rented a car, didn't want to use my own truck, and drove west on I-80, following the same route I'd taken that night. The highway was normal during daylight. Normal traffic, normal overpasses, normal mile markers that progressed at the expected rate. Mile marker 2117 looked like every other mile marker. The overpass near it looked like every other overpass, just concrete and steel, carrying a county road over the interstate. I drove under it at 65 miles per hour, and the echo was normal. Less than a second. Just the sound of my car's engine bouncing off concrete. Nothing strange. Nothing wrong. I kept driving all the way to mile marker 351, where the nightmare rest area had been. There was no rest area, just highway. The exit I'd taken to reach it wasn't there. Everything was normal. I turned around and drove back, passing through that entire stretch of highway again. Mile marker 351 to 217, retracing my route from that night. Nothing unusual happened. No loops, no repeating overpasses, no impossible distances. It was just a highway, but I knew what I'd experienced. I knew what I'd seen and heard and felt. The loop had been real. The overpasses had been wrong. The distance had been impossible. And somewhere, on some version of I-80 that existed alongside the normal one, mile 217 still had no exit. Drivers were still getting caught there. Still passing under those overpasses over and over, counting their loops, carving tally marks, waiting for something to release them. Or not waiting. Just driving forever, trapped in an endless circuit of highway that looked normal but wasn't. I returned the rental car and went back to my apartment. And that night, I heard my CB radio crackle to life, even though it wasn't turned on, and wasn't even in my apartment. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, and in it I heard a familiar voice. "This is Nolan. Can anyone hear me? I've been driving for..." The transmission faded into static. Nolan was still there, still trapped, still passing under those overpasses, still experiencing those impossible echoes. He'd never escaped, and maybe he never would. I wanted to respond, wanted to tell him I'd made it out, that there was hope. But I didn't have my CB with me, and even if I had, I don't think he could have heard me. We were in different versions of the highway now. He was in the one that looped. I was in the one that worked normally, and the two versions couldn't communicate, except for brief moments when the boundaries between them thinned and voices leaked through. I never drove professionally again. The medical leave became a permanent separation from my company, and I didn't try to find work with another carrier. 7 years as a truck driver ended with one impossible night on I-80 in Ohio. I got a different job. Office work, data entry, something that kept me indoors and away from highways. It paid less, but I didn't care. I needed to be somewhere stable, somewhere real, somewhere that followed normal rules. But the highway followed me anyway. In my new logbook, the one I'd bought to replace the one covered in that repeating text, the entries started appearing on their own. I'd open it to a blank page to record something, and the page would already have text on it. Mile 217 has no exit. I stopped using logbooks. Kept my records digitally, on a computer, in files that couldn't be mysteriously written on, but the files corrupted. Every time I opened them, the text was there. Mile 217 has no exit. I stopped keeping records altogether. The echoes got louder. Every night, without fail, I'd hear trucks passing under overpasses. Sometimes it was just background noise, easy to ignore. Other times it was overwhelming, filling my apartment, making the walls vibrate. I moved to a different apartment. The echoes followed. I moved to a different city. The echoes followed. I learned to live with them, learned to tune them out, the way you learn to tune out traffic noise or train whistles or any other sound that becomes part of your environment. But every so often, on nights when the echoes were particularly loud, I'd hear voices in them. Drivers calling out on CB radio, asking for help, reporting their positions, trying to figure out what was happening to them. Nolan's voice still asking if anyone could hear him. The woman who'd said she'd taken exit 217 3 times and kept ending up back on the highway. A man named Carter, who said his fuel gauge wouldn't move no matter how long he drove. A woman named Riley, who said she'd been passing under the same overpass for 6 days straight. Voices of people who'd gotten caught in the loop and never escaped. People who were still there, still driving, still trapped. I tried to respond. Bought a CB radio, set it up in my apartment, tried to transmit messages to them, but they never heard me. Or, if they did, they never responded in any way I could detect. The loop was one way. Voices could come out, but nothing could go back in. 6 months after my experience, I received a package in the mail. No return address, no indication of who'd sent it. Inside was a map, a road atlas, the old-fashioned kind, with pages showing every highway and road in the United States. Someone had marked it up extensively, red circles on dozens of locations, scattered across the country, and next to each circle, a note. Mile 73, repeating overpasses, 3 trucks abandoned. Mile 149, exit to nowhere, voices on CB. Mile 217, no exit, confirmed multiple drivers. Mile 334, time distortion, fuel gauge anomalies. On and on, page after page. Dozens of locations where highways apparently broke down, where the normal rules stopped applying, where drivers got trapped in loops, or disappeared, or experienced impossible things. Mile 217 on I-80 in Ohio wasn't unique. It was just one of many thin spots, places where the infrastructure of the highway system had worn through to something else underneath. Whoever had sent me this map knew about them, had been documenting them, marking them, trying to understand them. And they wanted me to know I wasn't alone. There was no note with the map, no instructions, no explanation. Just the marked locations and the implicit message. This is real, this is happening, and it's happening everywhere. I kept the map, studied it, cross-referenced it with my memories of that night, with the route I'd taken, with the mile markers I'd passed. Everything matched. Mile 217 was marked with a particularly bold circle and 3 exclamation points. The mapmaker knew that location was especially dangerous. I started researching the other marked locations. Most of them were on major interstates: I-80, I-70, I-90, I-40. High-traffic routes that thousands of trucks and cars used every day. I found accident reports for many of them. Crashes near the marked mile markers. Vehicles that had left the road for no apparent reason. Drivers who'd died in circumstances that didn't quite make sense. A truck that had jackknifed on a clear, dry night with no traffic and no obstacles. The driver killed instantly. A car that had driven straight into an overpass support at highway speed. No skid marks, no sign the driver had tried to brake. A semi that had been found abandoned on an exit ramp. Engine running. Driver nowhere to be found. Accidents that might have been accidents or might have been something else. Drivers who'd gotten caught in loops they couldn't escape. Who'd made desperate choices that led to crashes or abandonment or simply disappearing. I wanted to warn people. Wanted to publish the map, put it online, tell other drivers to avoid these locations. But who would believe me? I had no proof, no evidence beyond my own experience and this anonymous map. I'd sound like a conspiracy theorist, a crazy person ranting about highway anomalies and impossible loops. And even if people believed me, even if I could convince them to take alternate routes, would it help? The thin spots seemed to move, or multiply, or appear randomly. The mile marker where I'd experienced the loop was mile 217, but other drivers might experience it at mile 215 or mile 220. The exact location wasn't stable. You couldn't avoid something if you didn't know where it would appear. All you could do was stay alert, pay attention to the echoes. Notice when overpasses started looking too similar. Watch your mile markers, your fuel gauge, your odometer. And if things started feeling wrong, get off the highway. Take any exit, even if you don't know where it leads. Risk the unknown side roads rather than stay trapped in the loop. That's what I tell people now, when I can. When I meet someone who drives long haul, when I encounter another trucker at a gas station or rest stop. I tell them my story. Most don't believe me. Some laugh, think I'm joking or exaggerating. But a few, just a few, get this look in their eyes, this recognition, and they tell me their own stories. The trucker who passed under the same overpass 7 times in a row on I-40 in New Mexico. The driver who spent 3 hours trying to exit I-70 in Kansas but couldn't find any off-ramps. The woman who drove through a tunnel in West Virginia and came out the other side 2 days later, with no memory of what had happened in between. Stories of highways that don't work right, of distances that don't match up, of time that flows differently. We're out there, those of us who've experienced it. A scattered network of drivers who know the truth about the highways. We mark our own maps, share information when we can, try to warn others, even though most won't listen. Because the alternative is to let people drive blind into these thin spots, unaware and unprepared. And that's not something I can live with. I still hear the echoes every night. They're part of my life now, a constant background presence that I've learned to accept. But sometimes in those echoes I hear something new. Not voices of trapped drivers, but something else. Counting. Very faint, almost inaudible, but definitely there. Someone or something is counting. The loops, maybe, or the drivers caught in them, or the thin spots themselves. Counting up or counting down. I can't tell which. All I know is that the number is getting bigger, or smaller. But it's changing, progressing toward some total that will mean something when it's reached. And I'm afraid of what will happen when the counting stops. Last week I had to drive to Cleveland for a work meeting. My company wouldn't accept any excuses. I had to be there in person. Had to present our data analysis to a client. I could have flown, could have taken a train, could have found literally any other way to get there besides driving. But something made me rent a car and take I-80, the same road, through the same stretch of highway. It was daylight this time, clear weather, good visibility. The highway looked normal, busy with traffic, lined with the usual trucks and cars, exit signs appearing at regular intervals. I passed mile marker 2 and 17 at 2:30 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. There was an overpass there, just like I remembered. County road crossing over the interstate. I drove under it at 68 miles per hour, and the echo was normal, less than a second. Nothing strange happened. But as I emerged on the other side, I glanced in my rearview mirror, and on the overpass I'd just passed under, I saw something that made my hands tighten on the wheel. There were people standing along the railing, dozens of them, maybe more, all perfectly still, all looking down at the highway, looking down at my car. I didn't stop, didn't slow down, just kept driving, watching in the mirror as the overpass receded behind me. The figures didn't move, didn't wave, didn't react, just watched. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that they were the drivers who'd never escaped. The ones still trapped in the loop, in some version of the highway that existed alongside this one. They could see me, could see normal reality, normal traffic, the world they couldn't reach anymore. And they were waiting. For what, I don't know. Maybe for the counting to stop. Maybe for the thin spots to widen enough that the two versions of the highway merge completely. Maybe for one more driver to make a wrong turn, pass under an overpass at the wrong time, and join them in the endless loop. I made my meeting in Cleveland, delivered my presentation, drove back home on a completely different route, avoiding I-80 entirely. And that night, the echoes in my apartment were louder than they'd ever been. Within them, I heard Nolan's voice one more time. Mile 217, day 673, still driving. Can anyone, please? Day 673. He'd been trapped for almost 2 years. I wanted to reach through the echo, wanted to grab him and pull him out of that loop and into normal reality. But I couldn't. All I could do was listen, bear witness to his suffering, and hope that whatever was counting would stop before it reached the end. I'm writing this down now, all of it, as clearly as I can remember. Not in a logbook. Those don't work anymore, always get corrupted with that repeating text. Just in a document on my computer, saved in multiple locations, backed up to cloud storage. If you're reading this, you're probably a trucker, or someone who drives long haul for work, or just someone who spends a lot of time on highways. And you need to know, mile 217 has no exit. But it's not just mile 217, it's dozens of locations, maybe hundreds, scattered across the highway system. Thin spots where reality doesn't work right, where you can get caught in loops that last for hours or days or years. They look normal, they feel normal, right up until they don't. So pay attention. Watch for the warning signs. Overpasses that look too similar. Echoes that last too long. Mile markers that don't progress at the right rate. Fuel gauges that don't move, or move wrong. GPS units that die suddenly. Exits that appear over and over. Time that doesn't match up. If you notice these things, get off the highway. Immediately. Take any exit, even if you don't know where it goes. Call dispatch. Tell them you have mechanical problems. Tell them anything. Just get off the highway and stay off until the feeling passes. Don't trust rest areas that appear when they shouldn't be there. Don't trust stranded drivers asking for help. Don't trust your instruments if they start acting strange. And whatever you do, don't try to take exit 217, because mile 217 has no exit. Not really. It just has an entrance. And once you're in, you might not find your way back out. The echoes are getting louder tonight. Louder than they've ever been. Within them, I hear not just voices, but something else now. Engines. Hundreds of engines, maybe thousands, all running at once. All those trapped trucks, still driving, still trying to find their way out. And beneath the engine sounds, beneath the voices, beneath everything else, I hear the counting. It's almost done. Almost at zero, or almost at infinity, I can't tell which. But when it reaches the end, when the counting finally stops, I think the thin spots are going to tear wide open, and all those trapped drivers, all those trucks still circling through impossible loops of highway, are going to come flooding out into normal reality. Or maybe normal reality is going to fall into the loops, and we'll all be trapped together, I don't know. All I know is that tonight, right now, at 3:47 a.m., I can hear my CB radio crackling to life in my closet, where I stored it months ago. And in the static, I hear my own voice. This is Mason Briggs. Mile marker 2117. I can't get out. The overpass keeps appearing. Can anyone hear me, please? I'm not in my truck. I'm in my apartment. I'm nowhere near I-80, nowhere near Ohio, nowhere near any highway at all. But somehow I'm still there, still driving, still trapped. The echo follows me everywhere now, and it always will, because mile 217 has no exit.